Chapter 26. 1999, January 28. At the entrance of the Hunter Association headquarters, Tianming stood still, looking up at the massive building. The architecture of the Hunter Association felt oddly familiar to him. It reminded him a lot of buildings from his previous life. Before this, he had spent most of his time in deep mountains or small county towns. In his earlier life, he lived in the style of a remote island town from the world of pirates. It had been a long time since he had seen a building with floor-to-ceiling windows like this one. 3 days had passed since he said goodbye to Boudreaux. During that time, Tianming had switched between several modes of transportation, trains, planes, and finally arrived at the Hunter Association headquarters. Back during the Hunter exam, President Netero had left before him and told him to come to the headquarters if he wanted to find him. So, as soon as the exam ended, he made his way here. After entering the building, he saw 2 receptionists in suits at the front desk. Tianming took out his Hunter license and explained his situation. "I'm looking for President Netero. I made an appointment with him earlier. I don't know if he mentioned it to you." A pink-haired receptionist took his Hunter license, checked his information on the computer, and smiled warmly. "Hello, Mr. Tianming. The president has been expecting you. Please follow me." Tianming nodded and followed her into the elevator. The two of them entered one after the other, and the elevator began its slow ascent. The building had about 100 floors, and the elevator moved slowly, so it took quite a while to reach the top. During the ride, Tianming used his observation hockey to scan the headquarters. Most people in the building were just regular staff with no signs of training or nen ability. They worked clerical jobs and had weak auras. The nen users he did detect weren't particularly strong either. Perhaps it was because he'd been hanging around people like Isuka, Illumi, and the Hunter exam's high-level examiners. Tianming had subconsciously assumed all nen users were at that level. But visiting the Hunter Association in person had proven him wrong. Even though he'd previously only encountered top-tier fighters, most nen users here were considerably weaker, even less impressive than newbies like Gon and Killua. As he got lost in thought, the elevator stopped on the 50th floor. The receptionist gestured forward. "We're here. Just follow this corridor to the end and you'll find the president's office. Knock and he'll be waiting inside." Tianming glanced at her, confused. She shifted uncomfortably under his gaze and took a small step back. "Is something wrong, Mr. Tianming?" They stared at each other for a few seconds. Then Tianming shook his head. "No, nothing," he said, stepping out of the elevator. He waved to signal she could leave. Once she got the signal, she quickly closed the elevator. This guy, Tianming, had such a strange way of looking at people. She felt like she'd met a dangerous guy. Better to stay away. But then again, I mean, with a face like mine, who wouldn't stare? Naturally, I'm stunning. She flipped her hair and got lost in her own fantasy while the elevator descended. Meanwhile, Tianming watched her antics through his observation hockey and muttered, "What a narcissist. Get out of the elevator already." Instead of heading to the president's office, Tianming lingered at the elevator entrance, because he knew no one was in the office. Netero had instructed the receptionist to lead him there, but wasn't actually there himself. Was the old man really that into playing hide-and-seek? While he waited, a group of muscle-bound men approached and surrounded him. The man in the lead was a burly figure wearing a white tank top. He stood 2 meters tall with huge muscles and shoulders so broad they looked like he had 3 heads. "Hey! You that Zhao Tianming guy?" Tianming frowned. They couldn't even pronounce his name right, definitely not here for anything good. This towering idiot stood right up in his face. Tianming had to tilt his head up to meet his eyes, which he found annoying. Instead of engaging, he leaned casually against the wall, yawned, and replied, "Yeah, that's me. What do you want?" The musclehead snapped his fingers. "Name's Gahari. I'm a criminal hunter. I heard you're the president's new disciple, so I came to test if you're worthy." Tianming raised an eyebrow. He hadn't agreed to be anyone's disciple. He corrected the guy immediately. "Netero only said he'd help me awaken my nen because he lost a bet." I'm not his disciple. I'm just here to collect what's owed. Who told you I wanted to be his apprentice? Gahari didn't like that. Don't waste your breath. I asked President Netero for mentorship more than 40 times and got rejected every time. Yet you, who just passed the hunter exam and haven't even started training, get guidance from him. Well, today I'm going to challenge you. If you can't beat me, hand over your spot. I'll even help you awaken your nen myself. I don't care about the title of master or apprentice. Tianming's eye twitched. I don't even respect Netero like that, and you think I'd let a random side character like you train me? Go look in the mirror before you talk big. Just then, the elevator returned to the 50th floor. Tianming waved lazily. You want a shot? Sure, go get it. Go talk to the president. I'm out. He stepped into the elevator, leaving the group stunned. They had shown up ready to throw hands, but didn't expect Tianming to just hand over the opportunity and leave. What the hell was going on with this guy? Tianming took the elevator all the way to the top floor, then climbed 2 more sets of stairs to the rooftop. As soon as he opened the rooftop door, he saw Netero lounging on a chair, basking in the sun. A helicopter was waiting nearby. Obviously, the old man had been there for a while. Netero sipped juice from a glass and chuckled. You found me pretty quickly. I was going to leave you a clue in the office, but looks like that wasn't necessary. Tianming smirked. He'd already spotted Netero here earlier using his observation hockey, that's why his expression was so weird when the receptionist led him to the 50th floor. Chapter 27. It was you who sent that Gahari guy after me, wasn't it? Tianming said proudly. You actually arranged for such a big idiot to test me. Do you think someone like him can stop me? Netero frowned at first, then casually put down his juice, stood up, and stretched. I didn't send Gahari. That guy might have just. Forget it. It doesn't matter. I'm ready, come with me. Where are you taking me? Obviously somewhere less crowded. When you chant, it's going to get pretty loud. If we do it in the city, it might cause a public panic. Netero had already watched the video of Hisako helping Tianming open his nen. Honestly, he was shocked by the sheer scale of Tianming's aura. It was the first time he'd ever seen someone possess such a massive amount of nen energy immediately after awakening. In his century-long life, Netero had seen countless people awaken nen. Even prodigies like Jing, Pariston, or his own son had only shown a slight edge over ordinary people when they first started. He had never seen a freak like Tianming, whose aura rivaled that of seasoned nen veterans the moment he awakened. Looking at the young, talented Tianming, Netero licked his lips, and for the first time in years, he felt his blood begin to boil with excitement. But that expression made Tianming uneasy. Why did this old man suddenly give off Hisako vibes? Are all the powerful people in this world a little twisted? Soon, the two boarded the helicopter that had been prepared in advance. As the rotors spun up, the aircraft lifted off and slowly flew out of the city. Inside the Hunter Association headquarters, a young man in a suit with golden hair smiled as he watched the helicopter vanish into the sky. He closed the blinds and turned back toward the thick file spread out on the desk. It was Tianming's information, and it was incredibly detailed. Zhao Tianming, huh? You're quite an interesting guy. An hour later, the helicopter flew into a remote mountain range. President Netero pointed down toward a plateau, then unbuckled his seatbelt and leapt out of the aircraft. Seeing this, Tianming didn't hesitate. He jumped out too. The high-altitude airflow stung his eyes, but once he judged the height to be manageable, he took a few mid-air steps and slowed his descent before landing smoothly. Once on the ground, Tianming looked around. They were on the summit of a flat-topped mountain, several times larger than a football field. The sides of the mountain were steep, nearly vertical. It would be extremely difficult for even professional climbers to scale it. What's more, the mountain was situated deep in the heart of the range. It was isolated enough that they didn't need to worry about onlookers or bystanders. Netero really knows how to pick a spot. This place could easily be the battlefield for Goku fighting the Scions. Netero's voice interrupted his thoughts. This time, The playful tone was gone. He'd become completely serious. I already know a little about your situation. Hisako helped open your nen, didn't he? Logically, you should be at the 10 stage by now, maybe only able to use Ren and 10. But I can't sense any aura from you at all. Unless you tell me exactly what's going on, I won't be able to help. Many people knew Tianming had a secret, but it was taboo to ask directly. Nen users' secrets were often the trump cards they used in battle. Exposing them to others would only put them at a disadvantage. If Netero weren't trying to teach Tianming, he never would have dared ask so bluntly. As for Tianming, he felt relaxed. Since he had come here asking for guidance, he had to give a reasonable explanation. But of course, he wouldn't reveal everything, especially not the full truth about his hockey. That was his core secret. He'd only share the necessary parts. About 3 years ago, a strange power awakened inside me. After looking into it, I thought it might be the legendary Nen. So, I quit my job and hid in the mountains to train. Netero listened attentively, occasionally stroking his beard. Tianming continued, but after training for 3 years, I realized something was off. The feeling I got was nothing like what I had read about Nen. I even tried the Mizumi-style water divination test. But it didn't do anything, the leaf and the water stayed completely still. That's when I realized the energy I was using wasn't Nen at all, but some special power that belongs only to me. Netero's eyes narrowed. Can you show it to me? Tianming clenched his right fist and infused it with armament hockey. Netero activated Gyo, focusing all his aura on his eyes to observe Tianming's energy. Your right hand definitely feels different than before, Netero said slowly, but this difference isn't something I can see with Gyo, it's more of an instinctual sense I've developed from fighting for decades. He rubbed his chin, a glimmer of excitement flashing in his eyes. It was clear that this unique energy Tianming had mentioned had piqued his interest. Tianming opened his hand and pointed his palm at Netero. Netero, understanding the gesture, raised his own palm and held it about 20 centimeters from Tianming's. The air between them shimmered faintly. Then Netero felt a distinct pressure, an invisible force pressing against his palm. It was strange and exhilarating to feel something that couldn't be seen or directly sensed with Nen. He quickly concentrated his Nen into his hand, meeting the opposing force head-on. Tianming sensed this and increased the output of his hockey. The two began a silent, invisible contest of will. As time passed, both men pushed harder and harder. The ground beneath them cracked like a spider web, and the faint crackling of static electricity sparked through the air. Cold sweat trickled down Tianming's forehead. In his perception, the man standing before him wasn't human. It was like trying to move a steel wall. No matter how much force he applied, he couldn't budge Netero at all. Just as he was about to run out of steam, Netero raised his hand, signaling him to stop. Tianming immediately pulled back his hockey and began breathing heavily. At that moment, he realized how shallow his previous assessment of Netero had been. Back during the exam, he thought he had a grasp of the old man's strength. But now that Netero was being serious, Tianming finally understood, this old guy was far, far more powerful than he had imagined. Netero retracted his aura, loosened his stance, and chuckled in his usual carefree voice. I believe you now. That definitely wasn't Nen. It's a completely separate power unique to you. And that must be why you can't properly awaken Nen. Tianming nodded. Yeah. This power I trained with came first, and it's much stronger. The Nen energy I do have gets suppressed by it. It can't break free or be released. Even Netero looked stumped now. If it had been an internal restriction or an oath-based condition putting Tianming into a state of Zetsu, Netero could have helped. But this situation was unprecedented. Not even an exorcist would be able to remove the power inside Tianming. After a long pause, Netero exhaled and kicked the problem back to Tianming. Chapter 28. You want to build a Nen ability the moment you start using Nen? Netero asked, his eyes wide with disbelief. Tianming nodded, indicating that Netero hadn't misheard. This was the solution he had been considering for a long time. Domineering aura contains both spiritual and physical energy. Nen, too, is composed of spiritual and physical energy. If either of these two forces had flaws, the solution would be simple: compensate for one with the other. In that way, the two could be balanced and merged. But the issue is, they're both already perfect forms of energy. And when two perfect yet distinct energies meet, incompatibility arises, just like what Tianming is experiencing now. To resolve this, he would normally have to give up Haki entirely. But his chosen method was to construct a Nen ability that could combine both Haki and Nen into one unified power. Moreover, he had to build it immediately, the moment his aura nodes were forced open by external energy. If he failed to complete it quickly, his Haki would rebound, crushing the attempt entirely. After hearing this plan, Netero fell into deep thought. Although he had never encountered a case like Tianming's, the logic behind it was sound. In the past, he had met individuals who unknowingly developed Nen abilities before even understanding what Nen was. So, the idea of constructing a Nen ability before fully mastering aura manipulation wasn't entirely outlandish. This method is indeed theoretically feasible, Netero said finally. But creating a Nen ability is extremely complex, especially for someone like you, who hasn't even fully practiced the fundamentals. It's going to be very difficult. Therefore, starting now, you'll study Nen theory with me. I'll also inject my own Nen into your body to help you grasp how it flows and operates. Tianming nodded, a confident smile curling at the corners of his mouth. His idea was feasible, finally, a real shot at becoming a full-fledged Nen user. Over the next few days, Tianming received foundational Nen training from Netero. The injections of aura helped him get used to the sensation of controlling Nen energy, though they weren't strong enough to open his aura nodes. They were simply meant to familiarize him with the process so he'd have a better chance at controlling his own Nen later. Thanks to his decades of experience with Haki, Tianming picked it up surprisingly quickly. Though Haki and Nen are fundamentally different, his deep familiarity with manipulating internal energy gave him a strong head start over typical beginners. The two of them trained diligently in the desolate mountain range, receiving only supply drops via helicopter from the Hunter Association. All other time was spent simulating the process of constructing a Nen ability. By the third evening, the sky glowed orange with the setting sun. Tianming took a deep breath and turned to Netero. "I'm ready." Netero didn't respond immediately. He glanced westward toward the horizon. "It's getting dark. You've barely rested these past few days. Why not take the night to recover your energy and try tomorrow morning?" Tianming shook his head. "No need. The longer we delay, the more it'll mess with my momentum. I need to strike while the iron's hot. Right now, I'm in the zone. That's when my chances of success are highest." At that moment, Tianming felt completely clear-headed. Everything he had studied over the past few days, the principles of Nen, its techniques, its theory, was flowing through his mind like a well-oiled machine. He was in a state of flow, and he had to take advantage of it. Since Tianming was insistent, Netero didn't argue. He gestured for him to sit down cross-legged on the ground, though he still reminded him with a hint of caution. Constructing a Nen ability is not as easy as you think. If it doesn't work out, treat this as a rehearsal. Don't expect to succeed on the first try. Tianming replied with confidence, "Don't worry. I know what I'm doing. Besides, I'm a specialist, so my chances of fusing this kind of hybrid ability are higher than if I belonged to one of the other 5 types." Netero's eyelids twitched slightly. This guy had never even taken the Mizumi-style water divination test. Where was all this confidence coming from? In Nen, there are 6 types: enhancement, emission, manipulation, conjuration, transmutation, and the rarest, specialization. If you try to create a Nen ability that doesn't match your natural type, the resulting power is reduced. For example, if an enhancer tries to create a transmutation type ability, the output will only be 80% effective. If they try a manipulation or conjuration ability, it drops to 60%. Specialists are the odd ones out. Their powers are the most bizarre and least predictable, abilities like stealing others' Nen, seeing into the future, or bending the rules of Nen itself. Netero tugged at his beard, staring at Tianming in puzzlement. Where did this guy get the nerve to claim he was a specialist? Specialists are either team leaders or lone wolves. They're either captains or wild cards. Tianming didn't seem like either. If anything, he gave off enhancer vibes, someone more like Netero himself. But Tianming was already sitting down, eyes closed, focusing intently. He hadn't noticed the strange look Netero was giving him. He began regulating his breathing, calming his haki to create space for the incoming Nen. Netero let out a silent sigh and pressed his right palm to Tianming's back. He channeled a massive surge of aura into Tianming's body, far more than in any previous training session. The torrent of Nen filled Tianming's body, and at the same time, his own inner aura surged in response, pushing outward to break through the walls of his aura nodes. Now! Netero barked. He withdrew his hand. That was all he could do. The rest was up to Tianming. Tianming clenched his jaw and focused on suppressing his haki, which was rampaging through his body like a wild beast. At the same time, he took hold of the newly awakened Nen energy, now shining a brilliant white, and began constructing his own Nen ability. Violent air currents howled across the mountain. The sheer intensity of the energy blasted through the trees and stunned birds mid-flight. Netero reached out and gently caught a dazed bird before it could fall, placing it safely aside. Then he turned back toward Tianming with a deep, thoughtful gaze. Just as the Oreo had once said, this guy's Nen energy was absolutely massive. His potential rivaled that of Mahazoldik. Though not as immense as Netero's own, it was still among the most powerful Nen capacities in the world. And this was just the beginning. This was Tianming just starting out with Nen. As he continued refining his aura, his capacity would only grow. At this rate, it wouldn't be long before Tianming's total aura output could match Netero's. Netero licked his lips, excitement building again. Teaching this guy had definitely been the right move. Maybe, just maybe, this was the one he'd been waiting for. Just as he was imagining a bright future, Tianming suddenly collapsed to the ground, panting heavily, drenched in sweat. Netero's hopeful expression faded. He sighed and rubbed his forehead. That's about what I expected. Chapter 29. Damn it. I was just this close. Tianming slammed his fist into the ground, forming a basin-sized crater in the solid stone. Cracks spiderwebbed outward, stopping only when they reached 5 meters away. Seeing this, Netero shrugged helplessly. Don't take it so hard. Hardly anyone manages to successfully construct their Nen ability on the first try. What's more, your ability isn't born purely from instinct or will, it's artificially designed to be functional. It's practically impossible to succeed with it on your first attempt. I finally came up with the perfect Nen ability. I spent so much time mentally designing it, refining it until it was flawless. But the moment I tried to activate it, it collapsed. I won't give up until I succeed in constructing it. Even Netero couldn't help but grow curious at that. Weren't they supposed to build an ability to balance Tianming's aura and Nen? Judging from his words, it sounded like he had changed course midway. The Nen ability you're trying to construct. It seems different from what we discussed. Mind telling me what you're aiming for this time? Ordinarily, Netero wouldn't press about another person's ability. It was taboo, since a user's Nen ability is often their trump card. But since he was the one personally training Tianming, he had no choice but to ask, in order to guide him properly and keep him from straying too far off course. Tianming didn't mind. The ability he was trying to create was so over the top that even if someone else knew its structure, it wouldn't matter. Originally, I was going to create a Nen ability that fused my haki and Nen to solve the conflict between the two. But then I thought, since I'm a specialist, and I'm not bound by the limits of any particular Nen category, why not use this opportunity to design something bigger? That way, the ability wouldn't just solve my aura conflict, it'd have far broader applications. The fusion of haki and Nen would only be one part of it. This way, I wouldn't waste my potential as a specialist. At that, Netero burst into laughter. His stomach cramped from it. This guy still believed he was a specialist? Where did he get this obsession from? Seeing Netero laugh so hard when he was already depressed from failure, Tianming's face darkened. I just failed to construct my ability and you have the nerve to laugh at me, old man? You better hope I don't succeed, or I'll smash your skeleton into dust. Noticing the growing hostility in Tianming's eyes, Netero wiped the tears from his laughter and apologized with a sheepish grin. Sorry. I couldn't help it. But you may be mistaken about one thing, you're putting the specialist category on too high a pedestal. What do you mean? Literally what I said. While specialist abilities are strange and unique, they're mostly support type. Among the 6 Nen categories, specialists are furthest from enhancers. If a specialist tries to use Nen for direct combat, their physical power is only about 40% of what an enhancer at the same level could achieve. In most battles, they function better as team support than as frontline fighters. Of course, there are exceptions. Some specialists can use abilities from other types at full power, but in general, their hodgepodge of traits doesn't outperform someone who's focused on a single category. Tianming scoffed inwardly at that. What about Kralo? What about Kurapika? Both of them had abilities that could adapt to practically any combat situation: offense, control, recon, defense, melee, ranged, you name it. Why bring up weak specialists instead of talking about those monsters? Netero seemed to read Tianming's thoughts. But if this guy didn't want to listen, so be it. Truthfully, his own Nen abilities didn't follow convention either, so who was he to lecture someone else? Still, he was curious about the specific structure Tianming had tried to construct. Tianming cleared his throat and said with a serious face. My ability is actually very simple. It's called omniscience and omnipotence. With just a thought, I can control everything in existence: human yin and yang, life and death, time reversal and pause, spatial transfer, energy manipulation, world laws, cause and effect. You name it. Once I have this ability, merging my 2 energy systems will be child's play. But every time I try to build it, my Nen collapses. Any idea why that might be? After Tianming finished speaking, he looked over at Netero, only to see the old man's jaw practically unhinged, his mouth wide open and eyes popping out. The last time he'd seen this kind of expression was in One Piece's over-the-top reaction shots. He didn't expect to see it here in Hunter x Hunter, and coming from Netero, no less. Tianming blinked. What's the problem? What's the problem? Too many to list. Netero had lived over a century and had never heard of a Nen ability this greedy. It was as if all the training and theory he had taught Tianming had gone in one ear and out the other. If you could really construct that kind of ability, wouldn't you be a god already? At first, Netero had thought Tianming was a bright young talent with incredible potential. Now he was starting to think his talent for comedy was even greater. He should consider becoming a comedy hunter. Still, the idea of omniscience and omnipotence wasn't entirely impossible. There was Nanika, one of the most top-secret existences in the world. The Zoldyck family guarded that secret fiercely. Even V5, the supposed rulers of the world, knew nothing of it. But Netero knew. Nanika was perhaps the closest thing to omnipotent, but even she could only act by granting others' wishes, and always at a cost. He had never heard of an ability that granted true omniscience and omnipotence for free. Not in the known world, and not even in the Dark Continent. After a long laugh, they got back on topic. Tianming had just wanted to test the waters with his absurd omniscient and omnipotent ability. If it had somehow worked, he'd have ascended instantly. But the crushing failure brought him back to reality. Nen wasn't a wishing machine. It was time to come down to earth and start building something more realistic, step by step. He took a deep breath and entered a meditative state once more. Netero, seeing that he was ready, placed a hand on his back and infused his aura again. Tianming's white mental energy reawakened, blazing like fire. The haki in his body surged in response, boiling furiously. But this time, Tianming completely ignored the turmoil from the haki. He focused all his attention on the white Nen energy. This time, he was going to do it right. Chapter 30. In a void space within his mind, Tianming's shadow floated silently in the center of an ethereal world. In front of him hovered a Taiji yin-yang symbol. He reached out to touch its surface, but his hand passed right through. It was not a physical object, only an illusory image. This was the Nen ability he had painstakingly built after great effort. With it, he could balance the Haki and Nen in his body, allowing the two energies to coexist. At last, he could access and utilize the immense Nen reserves inside him. His next training goal would be to use both powers simultaneously in battle. If successful, his combat power would effectively double, a tremendous leap forward. Moreover, Nen could be used to reinforce the body. In the pirate world, Haki diminished with physical decline. Once a user surpassed 60 years of age, their physical functions would deteriorate, and their strength would drastically decrease. However, while physical decline also occurred in the hunter world, Nen did not diminish with age. With proper technique, one could use Nen to strengthen the body and break through limitations imposed by aging. If executed well, it might even break the curse of waning power past 60. As for Tianming's Nen ability, this Taiji symbol not only balanced Haki and Nen but also allowed conversion between the two forces. In other words, Tianming could convert his Haki into Nen, or convert Nen into Haki. However, the conversion rate was relatively low. Converting 100 points of Nen yielded only about 60 points of Haki. A perfect one-to-one conversion was impossible. Still, Tianming didn't mind. His main goal had always been to make Haki and Nen coexist. If the conversion rate was poor, he could simply opt not to convert and use both separately. Now, it was time to give this new power a name. But what name? He stroked his chin in thought. In his previous life, he rarely named his techniques during battle. Like Dracula Mihawk, he treated even his strongest attacks as routine moves. He never went for flashy names like Zoro's. After some contemplation, he settled on a name. Since the Taiji symbol balanced dual energies, he would call it the Yin-Yang Balancer. Having chosen a name, he returned to the real world. Slowly, he opened his eyes, still sitting cross-legged as before. The ground around him was shattered in a spiderweb pattern, like a pebble had cracked a pane of glass. He was the center of it all. Using the ground for support, he stood up and realized that his body had instinctively entered the entanglement state. It seemed he had mastered this fundamental Nen technique naturally, without conscious effort. It looks like your ability construction was successful. I can feel a powerful Nen aura from you, Netero said proudly, stroking his beard. From here on out, just keep practicing based on the principles I taught you, and you'll be a proper Nen user. Tianming nodded. Though he never formally acknowledged it, he had received personal training from Netero. For the old man, it was immensely satisfying to see such a promising student succeed. It reminded him of his own younger days. President Netero, Tianming asked, you told me before that Nen users can construct more than one ability, right? Netero confirmed with a nod. While most Nen users only developed one ability, those with exceptional talent or years of training could construct a second or even third ability. Hisoka, for example, had both bungee gum and texture surprise. Then, Tianming asked, how does one construct abilities within the specialist category? Specialist type Nen was unique. It didn't follow the rules of the other 5 types, making it more difficult to define or create abilities within it. Even though Tianming had studied Nen and watched the anime in his previous life, he couldn't fabricate a specialist ability from imagination alone. Hearing this, Netero sighed and pulled out his phone to make a call. Half an hour later, a supply helicopter arrived. This time, instead of food, it carried a bucket of water and a clear glass. Netero poured water into the cup, placed a leaf on its surface, and said, let's do the water divination test. He didn't feel like explaining all the nuances of Nen categories to Tianming again. The Swarenshiki, water divination, test would make everything clear. Different Nen types caused different changes in the cup. Enhancement, water overflows. Transmutation, taste changes. Manipulation, leaf moves. Emission, color changes. Conjuration, impurities appear. Specialist, any other change or traits of multiple types. The reason for the test wasn't just to deflate Tianming's overconfidence. If Tianming really was a specialist, the water divination might reveal the direction of his latent ability. Netero had once seen a specialist whose ability related to space manipulation. During the test, the cup and water vanished into another dimension. Without water divination, that person might have never discovered the nature of their ability. Tianming knew nothing of this. He simply placed his hands on either side of the glass and began channeling his nen into the water. Both men focused intently on the cup, especially Tianming, who was excited to see what specialist effects would appear. A few moments later, something happened. The water in the glass surged upward like a fountain. It was the clear sign of an enhancement type. Tianming wasn't discouraged. He assumed, like Kurapika, he might show signs of multiple types, and waited for more effects to appear. Chapter 31. Tianming sat on the edge of the cliff, staring into the distance with lifeless eyes. In his previous life, he was unlucky enough to eat a devil fruit that turned him into a tiger. He thought his luck would change after arriving in the hunter world, but he didn't expect to receive the worst enhancement system. What's the difference between this enhancement type Nen user and a blank slate? When other people fight, they use all kinds of flashy abilities, but I've already lived through 3 lives and I'm still stuck fighting with my fists. Did I really need to travel across worlds just to keep throwing punches? In my first life, I was just an ordinary guy who could throw fists. Then I traveled to the One Piece world and became a humanoid tiger, and still used fists. Now I'm in the hunter world, and I'm still using fists. When is the fist fighting going to end? Netero, sitting nearby, was speechless. Ever since learning Tianming was an enhancement type, it was like the kid had lost his soul. Just how much did this guy look down on enhancers? Seeing Tianming like this, Netero couldn't just sit and do nothing. He sat down beside him, ready to offer some encouragement. Actually, you don't need to be so down. Enhancers are recognized as having the strongest offensive power among the 6 Nen categories. If you train in that direction, your future prospects are very promising. Tianming responded weakly, then why is your Nen ability called an 100 type Guanyin Bodhisattva? Don't tell me that ability's also part of the enhancement system. Netero didn't know how to respond for a moment. In truth, he was the kind of person who enjoyed setting challenges for himself. Pariston, the vice chairman of the Hunter Association, was a textbook example of a sinister schemer. Most normal folks wouldn't want someone like that as their second-in-command. But Netero insisted on keeping Pariston around because he was so difficult to deal with. It made things more interesting, and life less boring. As for Netero's Nen ability, it was developed for similar reasons. Despite being an enhancer, he chose to develop an emission-based ability, which he was least suited for. When he created it, he hadn't really thought about how it would help in battle. He mainly did it because it sounded fun. Now, faced with Tianming's question, the consequences of his decision were coming back to bite him. He sighed and said, "There's no need to get hung up on being an enhancer. Nen abilities are created to assist in battle. There's no rule that says enhancers must only fight hand to hand." His words perked Tianming up a bit. He looked at Netero, signaling him to go on. "In my opinion," Netero continued, "Nen abilities are there to support your fighting style. Even other types use enhancement techniques when they get into close combat. So don't trap yourself in one system. The goal is to find techniques that fit you. And honestly, enhancers do have advantages. Their close combat strength is unmatched among the 6 types. So when you construct a Nen ability, don't worry too much about attack power. Focus on how useful it'll be in real fights." Tianming finally understood. As an enhancement type, he didn't need to obsess over raw damage when building abilities. If he stopped boxing himself in by type, enhancers were actually the most flexible of the 6 categories. Except for Kurapika's special ability that allowed him to use 100% of every Nen category under strict conditions, enhancers actually had the most freedom when it came to developing abilities. Suddenly, Tianming remembered a minor character from the original series, Castro, a Nen user in the Sky Arena. He was also an enhancer, but had developed abilities from the conjuration and manipulation categories. Back when he saw that arc, Tianming had thought Castro was just unlucky, no one taught him nen properly, so he had to figure it all out himself. In the end, he took the wrong path, building abilities that clashed with his innate type, and got defeated by Hisoka. But looking at it now, if he had developed only enhancement abilities, would he really have stood a better chance against Hisoka? The answer was, no. Even if he stuck to pure enhancement, he would have just died faster against Hisoka. The problem wasn't his abilities, it was his lack of foundation. From Hisoka's perspective, Castro actually would have been a huge threat if he had more control. He was an enhancer with better close combat potential than Hisoka. Even if Hisoka kept his distance using bungee gum, Castro's doppelganger would wear him down from afar. Worse, the doppelganger could deal more physical damage than Hisoka's playing cards. In a drawn-out fight, Hisoka's cards couldn't easily hit Castro's vital points. But if the doppelganger used enhancement techniques in its attacks, it could inflict serious injuries, like broken arms or legs. Facing that kind of pressure, Hisoka had to gamble, using his own arms as bait. If defeating Castro had been easy, he wouldn't have gone to such lengths. All that talk about cutting off his arms just to see Maki was nonsense. Only an idiot would believe that. Tianming didn't buy it for a second. Hisoka only did that because he had no other choice. Winning by normal means was too risky. Realizing all this, Tianming suddenly saw things clearly. People like Netero and Castro, who used their enhancer traits creatively, were doing it right. But people like Huvogin and Gon, who only focused on brute strength, were on the wrong track. Enhancement shouldn't be the goal, it should be the foundation. The right approach is to combine it with flexible abilities that can truly dominate a fight. The moment that thought settled in, Tianming felt like a weight had been lifted. Even his nose, which had been stuffed up all day from frustration, suddenly cleared. Netero was relieved to see Tianming bounce back. He'd been worried this promising kid might not recover from the setback. But now, it seemed his words had gotten through. Since Tianming had awakened his nen and begun developing his abilities, Netero's original goal had been met. The next day, he packed up and prepared to fly back to the Hunter Association. Before leaving, he stroked his beard and asked, "You're not coming with me back to the association?" Tianming shook his head. "No. I'm going to meet someone first." The person Tianming had in mind was none other than Castro. He wanted to meet this talented guy who, in the original story, had tragically invested points in the wrong place. Netero smiled. "It's up to you. Just make sure you keep training hard. I look forward to the day when you come challenge me." At those words, Tianming's face instantly darkened. Netero's comment had reminded him of something unpleasant. If he remembered correctly, Netero would die in battle against the Chimera Ant King in about 2 years. The whole incident was suspicious from every angle. A Chimera Ant, from the Dark Continent, had somehow made its way to the Hunter world. What was even weirder, it didn't appear near the populated coastal areas. It showed up deep inland. In the NGL Autonomous Region, a place known for its underdeveloped civilization and strict isolation. Chapter 32. Seeing Tianming deep in thought, Netero asked curiously, "Why so serious all of a sudden? You look like you've got something on your mind." Tianming opened his mouth, but no words came out. The incident with the ants wouldn't happen for another 2 years. Even if he wanted to warn Netero now, there was no real way to explain it. Besides, that whole event had been a carefully planned conspiracy. Someone had deliberately allowed the Chimera Ants to enter the human world, intentionally stirring up chaos so Netero, as chairman of the Hunter Association, would be forced to act and eliminate them to restore balance. Whether as chairman or simply as a human martial artist, Netero had to fight the ants. Even if Tianming warned him, it wouldn't change anything. If the Chimera Ants were going to be stopped, it would have to be done quietly, by Tianming himself. So instead, he gave a vague answer. "It's nothing. Just thinking about nen abilities. I'll study them more deeply when I train on my own later." Netero shrugged. Since the kid didn't want to share, he didn't press. He leapt into the helicopter, which soon lifted off and vanished into the clouds. Tianming watched the aircraft disappear into the sky and let out a sigh. Then, without hesitation, he jumped down from the mountain. The surrounding mountains were so barren, not even a single tree grew there. A normal person would need several days and nights to escape that mountain range, but Tianming only took about 2 hours to walk out. He soon found a remote road and jogged along it for half an hour, until a fairly bustling city came into view. After entering the city, he headed straight for an air transport company. Flashing his hunter license, he easily secured a seat on an airship headed to the Sky Arena. The city housing the Sky Arena was far from Tianming's location. To kill time during the long journey, he flipped through TV channels and read newspapers on board the ship. Despite the chaos often portrayed in this world by the old thief, the hunter world was still, compared to the pirate world, in a relatively peaceful and prosperous era. The major news stories mostly involved crimes committed by Nen users. There were no full-scale wars between nations. It seemed the world government V5 held much tighter control here than the government in the pirate world. Even naval headquarters in that world could get attacked by pirates. 20 hours later, the airship arrived at the Sky Arena. Before seeing it in person, Tianming had assumed it was just a larger-than-normal TV tower. But the sight before him took his breath away. The base of the tower occupied nearly half the city's area. It wasn't that the tower had been built inside a city, it was more like a city had been built beneath the tower. The public airship Tianming had boarded was massive, capable of housing hundreds of people comfortably, but compared to the Sky Arena, it looked like a tiny bean. One of the arena's gates slowly opened, and the airship flew inside without hesitation, not even needing to worry about space or collisions. After disembarking, Tianming followed the staff's instructions to the registration office. The place was packed, there were at least 100 people lined up ahead of him. While waiting in line, he activated his observation hotkey to scan his surroundings. Although he couldn't detect the entire Sky Arena, he got a good sense of the strength levels inside. Despite the crowd, very few fighters actually knew Nen. Most true Nen users were above the 200th floor. Everyone below that was basically an ordinary fighter with limited potential. As he retracted his hotkey, he noticed someone trying to cut in line beside him. Just as he was about to speak up and tell the person to follow the rules, his attention was caught by a nearby TV screen on the wall. He immediately stopped caring about the line cutter. His eyes were glued to the television. What was playing was a match from the 50th floor, a fight between two very mismatched opponents. One was a towering, muscular man in his 40s, about 2 meters tall. The other? A spiky-haired kid, skinny and maybe 12 or 13 years old. That spiky-haired kid was gone. Tianming had originally planned to wait until he reached the 200th floor before looking for Gon and Killua, but he hadn't expected to see them so soon. As the match started, the big man lunged at Gon like a raging beast. But Gon simply extended a hand and lightly touched the man, then shoved him out of the ring. The huge man flew backward and slammed into the wall, which cracked under the impact. Dizzy and unable to stand, the referee stepped in, confirmed the man was knocked out, and declared Gon the winner. Tianming turned his gaze away from the screen. Besides Gon, he'd also spotted Killua in the video. Since they hadn't yet reached the 200th floor, he could go find them after he finished registering. At that moment, another problem dawned on him: the line was way too long. By the time it was his turn, Gon and Killua might already have leveled up. So he walked out of the line, heading straight to the front desk under the shocked and angry stares of everyone around. The staff member immediately warned, "Please register in order. Cutting the line may result in disqualification and a permanent ban from competition." Tianming cracked his neck and replied calmly, "Sure, regular extras need to line up. But I'm at least 200th floor material. My matches will bring more attention and revenue to your arena. So I think letting me skip ahead is fair, don't you?" Just then, the floor manager noticed the commotion and came over. As soon as he got close, he felt the strong aura of Nen surrounding Tianming. What surprised him more was how well controlled it was. This wasn't some novice who'd just unlocked Nen. This guy was a seasoned user, After learning the situation, the manager didn't hesitate. He immediately approved Tianming's registration. "Mr. Zhao Tianming, we'll arrange your first match on the 50th floor. If you have any requests, just let our staff know, we'll do our best to accommodate you." Tianming nodded, satisfied with the treatment. Just as he was about to say something polite and take his leave, he realized he was suddenly surrounded by a mob of fighters. "You think you can cut in line while we wait? You just called us extras? You arrogant bastard. Let's beat some manners into him. He clearly doesn't know what death means." Tianming turned to the floor manager, pointed at the angry crowd, and asked calmly, "These people are challenging me voluntarily, right? So if I teach them a lesson here, it's not considered a private fight?" The manager nodded. "They haven't officially registered yet, so technically, no, it won't be considered a private fight. But please try to show mercy. Don't leave anyone crippled." Chapter 33. Ah. Help. "I'm sorry, I was wrong. Please forgive me." Half an hour later, Tianming walked out of the registration office. Behind him, hundreds of people were lying on the ground in twisted heaps. Their faces were bruised and swollen, but their injuries were only superficial. Watching Tianming leave, the manager swallowed hard, feeling a lingering sense of fear. Originally, he thought Tianming would just knock down a few ringleaders to scare the rest, but he didn't expect the guy to flatten everyone in one go. At the same time, he couldn't help but feel a little sympathy for the newbie hunters waiting on the 200th floor. What they were about to face would be far from pleasant. With the help of the staff, Tianming quickly found Gon and Killua in the contestant waiting room on the 100th floor. When they saw him, the two kids immediately lit up with excitement. "Tianming, you're here too? I didn't expect to run into you at the Sky Arena," Gon exclaimed. "I heard you could make a lot of money if you reached the 200th floor," Tianming replied with a grin. "I figured, with my strength, it wouldn't be hard, so I came to register. I saw your match at the front desk, and you've gotten a lot stronger since last time." At this point, Gon really was stronger than the last time they'd met. During the hunter exam, Gon's strength wasn't particularly outstanding. In fact, without Nen, he ranked near the bottom during the final phase, only stronger than people like Leorio and Tunpa. Embarrassed by the praise, Gon scratched his head. "I've been practicing a bit. It was really tough. Killua made us follow a brutal training schedule." After hearing Gon's explanation, Tianming got a clearer picture of what had happened to the four main characters. After parting ways with Tianming, the group had escaped to a remote region and finally managed to shake off Illumi's pursuit. From there, they arrived at a small town to train. Killua had created a bunch of reasonable training routines, at least by his standards, but to the others, it had nearly killed them. Still, the results spoke for themselves. Their strength took a significant leap forward. Gon, at his current level, was far stronger than his counterpart from the same point in the original story. If he couldn't control his strength properly during a match, a simple palm strike might be fatal to his opponent. After the training, the four of them decided to split up temporarily. Killua and Gon came to Sky Arena to keep training and earn prize money. Leorio was studying for the medical qualification exam while waiting for a pro hunter to open his Nen. As for Kurapika, that guy was still the most frustrating. He was truly born with the oxen and horse holy body mindset. Instead of using his talents to dig deeper into the mystery of the Scarlet Eyes, he went and took on hunter jobs, basically, working part-time gigs. Tianming didn't even know what to say. There were countless ways to investigate the Scarlet Eyes, and Kurapika chose the one that turned him into a wage slave. It was enough to make capitalists weep and bosses clutch their chests in heartbreak. After catching up on each other's stories, Tianming briefly shared his own experiences. But honestly, there wasn't much worth mentioning. To sum it up, a tale of me and a centenarian in the wilderness. The group walked together through the corridor of the 100th floor, chatting and laughing. Every now and then, someone nearby would glance their way, curious about the noise. Just as the mood peaked, Gon suddenly stopped walking. He looked at Tianming with a serious expression. Tianming, do you remember the question you asked me during the hunter exam? Tianming's smile faded, and he met Gon's gaze seriously. After a pause, he answered, nope. Don't remember. Gon's serious face instantly collapsed, and Killua burst out laughing. I told you not to overthink it. You've been stuck on that question the whole time, but Tianming himself totally forgot about it. Ha ha ha. Gon took a deep breath, then said firmly, you asked me if I'd still refuse to give up if you weren't human, but a beast. Now, I can give you a clear answer. If you don't hurt my friends, I'll turn and run. But if you do hurt my friends, I'll definitely fight you to the end. Tianming looked into Gon's determined eyes, and for a brief moment, it was like staring into a mirror, at his younger self. He used to be like that too, fearless, convinced he was special, untouchable. But after experiencing one setback after another in the real world, he was forced to grow up. There was a time when he hated people like Gon. Stubborn idealists who insisted on being themselves no matter what. Tianming thought they were just naive, unrealistic outliers. He didn't even believe people like that could exist in reality. But one day, it hit him. Who was Gon, really? Wasn't Gon just himself, in the past? Not just himself. Most people, when they're young, are a bit like Gon. They charge into society full of dreams and hope, ready to take on the world. When they see injustice or darkness, they speak out. Until one day, they come across something they can't fix no matter how hard they try. And the Gon inside them dies, replaced by yet another adult. Some people become extremely selfish, caring only about their own circle. To them, outsiders are just tools or pawns. Think of Krillin, leader of the Phantom Troop. He was once just like Gon. The only difference was, after watching his friends die tragically, he was powerless to do anything. So he formed the troop in Meteor City, not out of cruelty, but to protect its people. But Gon was different. He had an incredibly strong will. Even after entering the chaotic world of hunters, he never really encountered a setback big enough to break him. Whether it was Hisoka, the Zoldyck family, the Phantom Troop, or even Greed Island, every opponent Gon faced was eventually swayed by his will. Even enemies ended up admiring him. Just like Tianming did. What they admired wasn't the boy in front of them, but the versions of themselves they used to be. Still, Gon's personality was both a strength and a weakness. The reason his opponents respected him was because their conflicts were never based on true opposing interests. That all changed when he met Neferpito, the cat woman. In the face of a race war and real, unsolvable conflicts, Gon's personal charm was completely useless. Pito wasn't swayed, wasn't touched, because her purpose wasn't to understand others. She existed to protect the king. Even if she developed emotions, they all centered around the Ant King. Her loyalty wasn't to the world, it was to a being. In that way, she was born to destroy people like Gon. To be honest, Tianming didn't want Gon's beliefs to be shattered like that, not like in the original story. He wished, instead, that Gon could have a happy ending, chasing his dreams to the end, like Uzumaki Naruto. Chapter 34. Tianming snapped out of his thoughts. Gon still had to walk his own path. In the end, he was just an outsider. Gene Freaks was the one truly meant to guide Gon. He smiled at Gon and said, I hope so. Just then, a staff member from the Sky Arena approached. It was time for Tianming's first match, and they had come to escort him to the ring. He looked at Gon and Killua. I'm heading to my match. Want to come watch? Killua shrugged. Not interested. You're just gonna flatten those weaklings. We'll head to the 200th floor and wait for you there. Gon chuckled awkwardly. Compared to watching Tianming stomp the lower-level fighters, he was more curious about the action on the 200th floor. Tianming nodded and didn't press the issue. After saying goodbye to Gon and Killua, he followed the staff to the 50th floor arena. The rules of the Sky Arena were simple: the lower the floor, the cheaper the tickets. Watching a match on the first floor was about as affordable as a park admission ticket. But starting from the 50th floor, ticket prices began to climb. Below the 50th, amateurs could still fight their way up, From the 50th floor on, it was the realm of professional fighters, far beyond the reach of average people. Tianming entered the designated arena. His opponent was a massive, broad-shouldered man with a thick, muscular frame. At a glance, he looked incredibly strong. But to a martial artist like Tianming, the man was riddled with flaws. Tianming couldn't be bothered to waste time or show off. He simply grabbed the man's wrist, gave it a light shake, and hurled him out of the ring. The man crashed to the ground unconscious. The audience was stunned, and then erupted into thunderous applause. Earlier, they had seen two teenage fighters bulldozing their opponents. Now, barely an hour later, another fighter had appeared who could also win with a single move. The crowd was thrilled. Totally worth the ticket price. Once the referee confirmed the big man was knocked out, he declared Tianming the winner. Just like Gon and Killua, he was fast-tracked, skipping straight to the 80th floor. As Tianming entered the elevator, he noticed a large group following him. Fortunately, they weren't troublemakers, just excited fans and spectators. Being watched like this made him feel a bit awkward. Luckily, as a fighter, he had access to a special passage. Otherwise, with all these people around, he might not have made it into the elevator at all. After arriving on the 80th floor, Tianming waited in the lounge for a short while. Less than half an hour later, his next match was already arranged. Finding a match in the Sky Arena wasn't a problem. Below the 200th floor, matches could be scheduled at any time. There were spectators around the clock, and every match attracted a full house. Standing in the ring, Tianming looked out at the packed audience. The scene reminded him of Dressrosa in his past life. The Colosseum there also hosted constant battles, but the fighters were much stronger than these. His opponent soon stepped into the ring. It was a small boy with a buzz cut, dressed in a white martial arts uniform. He was maybe 10 years old and a full head shorter than Gon and Killua. Something about the kid felt familiar. Tianming was struck by a strong sense of déjà vu. He was sure he'd seen him before. "Hello. I'm Zushi, a disciple of Shingenryu. Please take care of me." Tianming laughed at the boy's innocent introduction. So it was Zushi. No wonder he looked so familiar. Don't be fooled by his young age. Zushi was a genuine Nen user. That alone put him in the upper echelon of the Sky Arena. If Zushi was here, then he might be here too. Tianming glanced around and soon spotted Wing, dressed in his signature white shirt, watching quietly from a corner. Their eyes met. Wing gave a small nod and smile, which Tianming returned. Then he introduced himself to Zushi. "My name is Zhao Tianming. You can just call me Tianming." As soon as he finished speaking, the bell rang. Zushi charged forward and threw a punch, aimed at Tianming's knee. He wasn't targeting the knee on purpose. He just wasn't tall enough to hit the stomach, so the lower body was the only option. Tianming looked at the tiny fighter charging at him and didn't have the heart to go all out. He dodged a few of Zushi's attacks, then gently seized the boy's wrist. With a light motion, he spun Zushi into the air like a flying stick. Zushi flipped several times before landing outside the ring. Feet touching the ground, Zushi stood dazed for a few seconds. When he came to, the referee was already counting down. Panicking, he rushed to climb back into the ring. But just as he jumped up, Tianming calmly reached out and pressed a palm to Zushi's forehead. Push. Zushi was sent flying again. This time, he was even dizzier than before. When he finally regained focus, he didn't rush back. Instead, he stood with clenched fists, staring up at Tianming. Despite his age, Zushi was a Nen user. Normally, even seasoned martial artists stood no chance against him. He could win without even using Nen if he wanted. But today was different. He didn't believe there was a massive skill gap between him and Tianming. He chalked it up to height and reach, just a physical mismatch. If he used his Nen, he believed he could still win. However, Wing had strictly forbidden using Nen below the 200th floor. And now, with Wing watching from the crowd, he couldn't disobey. Thinking this through, Zushi steadied his emotions. Wing always said the most important thing in a fight was not to get impatient. Though his opponent had a physical edge, Zushi still had a chance. He just needed to stay calm. Just as he prepared to leap back into the ring, Tianming spoke softly. You should give up. The gap in strength between us is too wide. Even if you train for 10 more years, you still might not be my match. This wasn't arrogance, it was simply a matter of fact analysis. Zushi was talented, but ultimately, he was a normal human talent. At best, he might grow into a phantom troop level fighter, or maybe just a bit weaker. Tianming, even now, would have high chances of defeating troop members in one-on-one fights. Telling Zushi to train 10 more years wasn't an insult, it was the truth. But for Zushi, the words hit like a slap in the face. Young fighters care deeply about their pride. And Zushi, who saw himself as a genius, took this as an open insult. Tianming's calm tone felt like humiliation. Zushi clenched his fists. Nen energy surged around him as he shouted, "Don't look down on me, you jerk." With that furious cry, he leaped onto the ring, determined to teach Tianming a lesson. But just as he charged forward, a thunderous voice erupted from the stands. Zushi! The roar was so powerful, it seemed to pierce everyone's ears, and strike directly into their minds. Chapter 35. Zushi, who had been about to attack, froze at the roar. He instinctively shrank back and looked toward the source, locking eyes with Wing's stern gaze. The heat of the moment quickly faded. Realizing he had lost control to anger, Zushi lowered his fist and bowed deeply to Tianming. "I surrender." The audience immediately began to boo. Truth be told, many of them had been hoping to see Zushi tap into his hidden strength and pull off an upset. That's the thrill of watching fights, the underdog beating the odds. Tianming looked at Zushi, who was quietly preparing to leave, and gave him a nod. "It's impressive that you've reached this level at your age. But it's a shame you started using Nen too early. Your body isn't ready for the strain of high-intensity Nen combat. Right now, you should focus on building a solid foundation, and avoid using Nen too frequently." Zushi was stunned. He hadn't expected Tianming to be a Nen user as well. If he weren't, how could he speak so precisely about Nen's mechanics? And then it hit him. He remembered his thoughts just moments ago, about how easily he could win if he used Nen. Now, his face flushed red with embarrassment. If the opponent was a Nen user too, then that logic made him look like a complete clown. If Tianming could defeat him without using Nen, and they both used Nen, then wouldn't the gap be even larger? Zushi stood straight again and bowed respectfully. "Thank you for your advice. I'll remember your words." With the match over, the two left the stage together, and were immediately greeted by Wing, who was standing outside the arena with a stern expression. Tianming paused and watched with interest as Wing scolded his disciple. A moment later, Wing turned to Tianming and gave a formal bow. "My apologies, Mr. Zhao Tianming. My disciple caused you trouble." Tianming frowned slightly. "How do you know my name?" Reading his expression, Wing smiled. "Although you only recently received your hunter license, you've already made quite a name for yourself." As it turned out, Tianming's bold arrival at the Hunter Association had drawn a lot of attention. After some digging, people discovered that this young man had actually asked to train in Nen directly under Chairman Netero. Netero had often given general guidance to the younger generation, but it had been ages since he'd taken a full leave of absence for over a month just to help someone train. Naturally, speculation ran wild. Many believed that Tianming had become Netero's personal disciple. Rumors spread fast, and soon the Hunter Association's official website was buzzing about the chairman's new student. Tianming quickly became the center of attention in the Hunter circle. "If we go by lineage, you're actually my senior," Wing added. "The person who taught me Nen was a direct student of Chairman Netero. I didn't expect I'd be a generation below someone my own age. Depressing stuff, haha." He gave a sheepish smile, but then noticed Tianming's face darkening, and his awkward grin only got worse. "I've already told so many people, I'm not Netero's student," Tianming muttered with frustration. "He only taught me Nen because he lost a bet. That's it. We don't have any master-disciple relationship." He felt like he had to explain this endlessly. All he did was collect on a favor from a bet, So why was everyone acting like he was Netero's apprentice? Sensing that Tianming clearly didn't enjoy the topic, Wing wisely dropped it. Honestly, he didn't enjoy calling people his own age senior uncle either. So he steered the conversation to safer ground. After a bit of casual talk, Tianming suddenly thought of something and turned to Wing. You've been training in Nen for years, right? What's your category? Of course Tianming already knew he was an enhancement type. But courtesy demanded he ask, it'd seem suspicious otherwise. I'm an enhancement type user. Why do you ask? Tianming got straight to the point. I took the water divination test and found out I'm also an enhancer. I'm currently developing my Nen abilities, so I wanted to get your perspective on constructing enhancement type abilities. As soon as the topic turned to Nen, Wing's demeanor shifted into serious mode. He was passionate about the subject and loved discussing its principles. After organizing his thoughts, he responded. In my opinion, developing enhancement type abilities starts with mastering the basics in daily life. The advanced techniques in Shingen Ryu Nen are perfect for enhancers. There's no need to overcomplicate things. Nen abilities can be kept simple and still be extremely powerful. In fact, simplicity is the key. The simpler the ability, the more stable and effective it becomes. You don't need to overthink it. Build a straightforward, practical Nen ability. His reasoning was sound, in theory. But for Tianming, hearing theory wasn't enough. What he needed now was inspiration, and the person who could offer that was Castro, who Washi Dulong, the wild genius who defied the system. To Tianming, Wing felt like more of a theorist. Sure, everyone knew enhancers needed to develop their close combat abilities. But that didn't answer the real question, how do you get close to a long-range enemy and actually deal damage? What if your opponent was someone like Morel, who excelled in keeping distance? You can't just charge in recklessly like Gon or Yuvagan, kick up some dust and hope for the best. And some Nen users were naturally resistant to close combat, like that member of the Shadow Beasts who wrapped enemies in cloth. Against people like that, enhancers could do nothing but stare blankly. Nen abilities needed to be designed with real combat in mind, not just theoretical principles. Looking at Wing, who was still passionately discussing technique, Tianming finally cut in. After I reach the 200th floor, would you be willing to spar with me? Zushi, who had been quietly eavesdropping, perked up immediately. He had never seen his master in a real battle before, especially not against another Nen user. The idea of it filled him with excitement. As for the possibility that his master might lose, that hadn't even crossed his mind. To him, Wing was top tier, a true master. Sure, Tianming might have learned Nen from Netero, but he was still a newbie in comparison. There was no way he could defeat Wing. Wing was caught off guard, but he chuckled. Spar with you? Nah, I'm more of a theory guy than a fighter. Plus, I'm not even registered as a combatant here. I can't enter the matches. Theory also needs to be tested in practice, Tianming said flatly. If you don't fight, how will you know which ideas don't work with your fighting style? As for the match, there are plenty of open spaces near the Sky Arena. We can just have a friendly match outside. It won't take much of your time. But the two went back and forth for a while. Eventually, Wing gave in to Tianming's persistence and agreed to a simple friendly match, and nothing more. Chapter 36. After that, Tianming fought a few more matches. The ordinary fighters, none of whom had even unlocked Nen, were like paper in front of him. After a series of easy, instant wins, he finally earned the qualification to ascend to the 200th floor. Standing in front of the elevator on the 180th floor, Tianming turned to Wing and Zushi. I won't be around for a while. Let me know when Zushi makes it to the 200th floor. Wing and Zushi both nodded, watching Tianming step into the elevator. Wing recognized Tianming's strength and saw no need to warn him about the infamous newbie hunters who preyed on newcomers above the 200th floor. Those guys wouldn't pose any real threat to someone like Tianming. Inside the elevator, Tianming noticed the operator, a girl with short red hair and work clothes. She looked to be in her early 20s and carried the kind of exhausted energy that said she was too tired to even fake a smile. Then it clicked. She was the same elevator operator from the original story, the one who got wrecked by Gon and Killua. From the look in her eyes, she still hadn't fully recovered from that trauma. When the elevator doors opened on the 200th floor, Tianming stepped out, and was immediately hit by an overwhelming aura of pure nen. Before, he'd relied on observation haki to handle this kind of pressure. But now, with his nen fully awakened, he could actively push back, feeling the emotions embedded in the aura as well. This particular aura felt twisted and insane, like dozens of eyes staring at him from all directions, inspecting him like prey. Tianming knew exactly who it belonged to. He snorted, then pushed his own nen outward, clashing with the aura head-on and suppressing it completely. Once the confrontation died down, he followed the corridor to the end, turned the corner, and sure enough, Hisako was sitting casually on the floor, shuffling a deck of cards. "You're really that bored? Is this your idea of fun, using cheap tricks to mess with me?" Tianming sneered. Hisako chuckled with glee. "I came to check in on Gon after tracking him down. But I didn't expect to find you here too. I caught your match on the live broadcast. Want to fight? I'm very curious to see how strong you've become." During the nen clash just now, Hisako had been thrilled. He remembered sensing Tianming's life energy during the Hunter exam, powerful, yes, but more like stagnant water. It didn't pose any real threat. But this time? Tianming's nen felt like a primordial beast, and just brushing against it made Hisako's scalp tingle. The sheer amount of energy was at least 3 times his own. And considering Tianming already had high combat skills before awakening nen, the idea of fighting, maybe even killing, him filled Hisako with perverse excitement. He was so worked up he pitched a literal tent. Tianming instinctively took a step back, his expression twisting in disgust. "My goal isn't you. I came here to find someone named Castro. You know him, don't you?" Hisako's smile instantly vanished. Castro was his fruit, he'd carefully nurtured that one. Was Tianming trying to steal it? Reading Hisako's expression, Tianming sighed. "Relax. I just heard he's a fellow enhancer and has an interesting nen ability. I wanted to meet him and exchange ideas. Don't worry, I'm not going to kill him, and he's not killing me either. We'll both still be around for you." Hisako's mood softened a bit, but he still gave a sly grin. "You're confident. But underestimate him and you will pay." Yeah, I get it," Tianming waved. "I'll go check in first, then I'll come find you." "No need," Hisako offered. "I've already got a room. Just crash with me." Tianming turned and bolted toward the staff office without looking back. No way was he staying in the same room as this perverted clown. Tianming quickly completed the check-in process and was led to his personal room on the 200th floor. It was a spacious suite, around 300 square meters, with all the daily amenities and modern appliances. The decor was clean and minimalistic, with no flashy distractions. He liked it immediately. He'd brought some luggage with him to the Sky Arena, and as he opened his suitcase to organize his things, a familiar voice echoed from the living room. "We've been waiting for you here for 4 hours. Didn't expect it'd take you this long to get to the 200th floor." Tianming didn't even need to turn around. He recognized that cocky tone, Killua, lounging on the sofa like he owned the place, casually biting into an apple. Gon was more polite. He stood by the door, which Tianming hadn't even had time to lock, and knocked before entering. Tianming sighed and set down the item in his hand, then slumped onto the sofa. "You guys seriously have some bloodhound genes. I barely got up here and you've already tracked me down." "It's not hard," Killua said casually. "Tianming has a unique smell. Easy to find." Gon rubbed his nose, slightly embarrassed. "It's true." Tianming was speechless. He had just made a joke about his scent, but apparently these two really tracked him by smell? Still, they probably didn't come here just to chat. Sure enough, after a bit of small talk, Gon's expression turned serious. "We ran into Hisako when we came upstairs earlier." Tianming nodded. "Go on." "I made a promise with him, for a one-on-one fight. The deadline is within 6 months. So, I wanted to ask if you'd help teach me the basics of Nen. Please. Tianming collapsed backward into the couch again. Seriously? They came all the way here to ask him to be their Nen teacher? He'd only just started learning Nen himself under Netero. How was he supposed to teach them the basics? And on top of that, he was focused on developing his own unique enhancer ability. Babysitting these two wasn't part of his plan. Still, he didn't scold them. He waved a hand dismissively. You don't need me for that. The Hunter Association already assigned someone to teach you. I saw him downstairs earlier. That guy's strong, definitely not weaker than Hisoka. Trust me, he'll be way better at teaching Nen than a newbie like me. Chapter 37. 3 days later, at noon. In room 20075 of the Sky Arena, a steel cone glinting with silver light stood tall in the center of the living room. The 1-meter-long spike was welded to a square iron plate about the same width. 4 thick steel bars secured it in place from all directions. The whole structure looked brutally sturdy. The tip of the spike was razor sharp. If someone fell on it, they'd be impaled straight through the chest. But right now, Tianming was upside down, balancing on its tip with just the index finger of his right hand. It was a training method he had stumbled upon by accident. He remembered reading Yu Yu Hakusho in his previous life, where the protagonist Yusuke used this exact technique to train. Inspired, he asked the Sky Arena staff to custom build one for him. Logically speaking, the training shouldn't work. Yusuke trained spiritual energy, while Tianming was cultivating Nen, two completely different energy systems. But both Hunter x Hunter and Yu Yu Hakusho were written by the same author, so Tianming figured, same guy, same logic, might as well try. Surprisingly, it actually worked. Forcing all his Nen into one finger dramatically improved his control. If he kept going, he might even reach the level where he could form a Nen Pile crystallization of refined Dora. Just as he was fully focused on maintaining his balance atop the spike, a sudden and aggressive knock sounded at the door. Tianming was about to use his observation haki to check who it was, but that momentary distraction caused his aura concentration to collapse. The energy around his fingertip scattered, and the steel spike surged upward toward his face. More accurately, his face dropped toward the spike. With only a centimeter left before impact, Tianming activated one of the 6 styles, paper drawing, Kami. He slid his head along the steel edge with fluid finesse, then pushed off the floor with his palm and landed solidly on both feet. He let out a deep sigh, frowning toward the door. Just one knock was enough. What's with the crazy banging? When he opened the door, he found Gon frowning and Killua looking irritated. They had no idea what Tianming had just survived. Killua spoke first, clearly annoyed. It's been 3 days. Where's that Nen master from the Hunter Association you told us about? Tianming frowned and motioned for them to come in. After shutting the door, he pulled out his phone. By all logic, Wing and Zushi should have arrived a few days ago. So why hadn't they shown up? He wasn't too worried. Wing was plenty strong, but something about this delay didn't sit right. In the original timeline, Wing and Zushi had arrived on the 200th floor at the same time as Gon and Killua. Could Tianming's presence have triggered some kind of butterfly effect? The phone rang a few seconds before Wing's voice came through on the other end. Hey! Hey! It's been days. Why haven't you come up yet? Did something happen? On the other end, Wing sighed. He'd expected Tianming to be impatient. I'll explain in person. Give me a second, I'm coming up now. He hung up. Tianming put away his phone and sat down on the couch with Gon and Killua, waiting. A short while later, there was a knock at the door. Tianming opened it to find Wing, looking exasperated, and Zushi, looking defeated. Zushi had a bruise on his lip and a bandage on his cheek. He'd clearly taken some damage, though nothing serious. Once they were inside, Wing and Killua exchanged a wary glance. The atmosphere lightened slightly after Tianming introduced both parties. Still frowning, Tianming asked, "Why'd you take so long to come up? Something happen?" Wing gave Zushi a look. The boy sighed and began explaining, clearly embarrassed. After parting ways with Tianming, Wing had planned to buy Zushi an audience ticket for the 200th floor, a valid way to access the upper floors without ranking up as a fighter. Wing himself had already registered on the 200th floor back when he was younger, so the ticket was just for Zushi. But that's when Zushi's pride kicked in. He'd heard about two other kids around his age, Gon and Killua, who had climbed up the tower through combat. Then, he saw Tianming effortlessly wrecking opponents and rising to the 200th floor like it was nothing. Zushi couldn't stomach the idea of showing up with a spectator pass. He wanted to earn his spot through fights. At first, he did okay. But things changed around the 160th floor. By the 170th, he hit a wall. The opponents Tianming had swatted away like flies. They were now fired up and vicious in front of Zushi. He used every bit of Shingenryu technique Wing had taught him, but still couldn't break through. Seeing Zushi so discouraged, Gon stepped forward and comforted him in his usual cheerful way. Killua, however, watched Wing and Zushi with a skeptical glare. "This guy's supposed to be our Nen teacher?" Tianming noticed Killua's disdain, but didn't care. These were Gon and Killua's problems, not his. He had already done enough by connecting them with Wing. What happened next was up to them. Wing, trying to stay professional, asked Gon and Killua about their training progress. When he learned they had only barely mastered 10, he immediately pointed out their flaws and corrected their aura control techniques. After this short demonstration, Killua's attitude changed. The weak-looking guy in glasses clearly had some real skills. After everyone left, Tianming finally felt relieved. He dealt with everyone else's problems, now it was time to focus on his own. He tidied up the room and then made his way to Hisoka's room, using the address Hisoka had given him earlier. When he reached the door, he didn't knock. Instead, he activated observation haki to scope things out first. This was Hisoka's room, after all. But what he saw made his brow furrow into the shape of the Chinese character. Just as he was about to turn and leave, he heard Hisoka's voice from inside. "Now that you're here, why are you trying to sneak off?" Tianming turned back, only to see Hisoka opening the door. Completely naked, hair dripping wet, and his lean, sculpted figure on full display. Tianming instantly recoiled, resisting the urge to vomit. A female staff member happened to walk by at that moment. She screamed, blushed, and turned away, then glanced back over her shoulder, as if she was almost impressed. Chapter 38. Tianming didn't say a word. He just slowly raised his right leg. Hisoka's eyes twitched. Something about that gesture clearly brought back traumatic memories, and his usual frivolous demeanor vanished as he straightened up slightly. "Let's talk after we go inside," he muttered. Tianming stepped into the room and immediately activated Gyo, carefully scanning the space with intense focus. Hisoka, now wrapped in a towel, gave a helpless shrug. "You're way too cautious. If I ever decide to kill you, it'll be in a proper match, not through some lame sneak attack." Tianming didn't respond. As far as he was concerned, 9 out of 10 things Hisoka said were lies. Actually, 8 out of 10, if he was being generous. You couldn't take risks in this guy's room. Even if there weren't any net traps, there might be some nasty little surprise hidden around, like, say, a certain torture device you really didn't want to sit on. And for those unfamiliar with the thing, it's best not to Google it. A few minutes later, Hisoka returned, hair damp, dressed in a white bathrobe, and lounging lazily on the sofa across from Tianming. "All right," he said with a yawn. "What do you want?" "I want to meet Castro," Tianming said bluntly. "I'm not familiar with him, so I need you to introduce me." Hisoka's smile widened, his eyes sparkling with amusement. Tianming clearly already knew about the bad blood between him and Castro. If Tianming tried to challenge Castro directly to a private match, it'd likely get denied. After all, private fights are banned in the Sky Arena. Getting caught would mean immediate disqualification. It would take weeks to file an official duel request. And Tianming wasn't the type to sit around and wait. He was clearly trying to exploit the grudge between Castro and Hisoka to bait Castro into accepting a private match on the spot. He had previously said it was for studying Nen ability construction, but now it was obvious, he just wanted to fight. Hisoka stretched out on the couch, resting his legs on the table. Why should I help? There's nothing in it for me. And I don't like meeting the fruit before it's ripe. I prefer to harvest them unexpectedly. Tianming had expected this. Hisoka was a pervert, but he wasn't stupid. If there was no benefit, he wouldn't lift a finger. But Tianming already knew exactly what Hisoka wanted. He smiled. You must have noticed that Castro's path is a little off. After you forcibly opened his aura nodes 2 years ago, he didn't train under a proper Nen teacher. He's been figuring it out himself, wild and unrefined. Hisoka's expression shifted slightly. He didn't enjoy torturing broken geniuses. He wanted to fight talents who could push him to the edge. If Castro wasn't progressing properly, their next fight would be a disappointment. Tianming saw the opening and pressed forward. In 1 month, your scheduled match with him arrives. If someone helps him refine the basics of Nen before then, you'll get to enjoy a perfect battle. Hisoka chuckled, clearly tempted. He was more intrigued by Tianming by the second. Tianming felt Hisoka's bloodlust suddenly surge, like a suffocating tidal wave. Without missing a beat, Tianming released his own murderous aura. It was calm, steady, and pure, lacking any of Hisoka's madness, but just as heavy. The clash made the entire room tremble. Vases cracked. The TV exploded. Fortunately, the Sky Arena had reinforced contestant rooms, so the pressure didn't leak out into the hallway. After a long standoff, Hisoka withdrew his aura. He was shocked. Tianming's raw pressure had completely overwhelmed him. But that only excited him more. Prey stronger than himself, that was Hisoka's ideal hunt. Tianming was more than delicious. He was irresistible. Fine, Hisoka said slowly. I'll take you to Castro. But when I fight him next month, you have to promise me. I get to see his transformation. Hisoka's eyes darkened. He wanted to threaten Tianming but hesitated. There was nothing he could use. Strength? Useless. Tianming was stronger. Threaten his loved ones? Pointless. Tianming was an orphan with no attachments. After racking his brain, Hisoka's eyes suddenly gleamed. He dropped the threatening act and leaned forward with a lewd smile. If you mess up my plans to harvest that juicy fruit, then I'll have no choice but to make you take a bath with me. He raised an eyebrow, slowly shifting his leg from the table, revealing a little too much under his open robe. Tianming almost threw up right then and there. This damn clown. Is this how he gets revenge? Psychological warfare? Still, Tianming wouldn't give him the satisfaction of backing down. He grit his teeth and shot back. Afraid? Me? If you really want to take a bath, let's do it right now. I'm not scared. Hisoka's eyes lit up. Okay then. Let's bathe together. Tianming's face paled. All right. Fine. I was wrong. Don't take off the bathrobe, let's talk this out like civilized people, damn it. 15 minutes later, the two arrived at the door of another contestant's room. Hisoka casually pointed at the door. He's inside. Tianming didn't knock immediately. He activated observation haki again, scanning the room. Sure enough, someone was seated cross-legged inside, likely meditating. Just as Hisoka grew impatient and reached to knock, a cold voice rang out behind them. Hisoka. What are you doing here? Tianming and Hisoka turned around. A man stood behind them, white hair, white robe, around 25 to 30 years old. His features were sharp, his gaze piercing, and an unmistakable murderous aura poured off him. Castro. The moment Tianming and Hisoka had arrived, he'd sensed them. With his strength, how could he not? He hadn't acted immediately. Instead, he crept to the interior wall closest to the hallway and extended a Nen clone to peek through and observe. But the moment his clone identified Hisoka, Castro nearly lost control. 2 years ago, Hisoka had nearly killed him in the ring. That traumatic defeat was the very thing that drove him to awaken Nen. And although he owed his growth to that loss, he felt no gratitude. To him, Hisoka had used him like a test subject, someone to break and then discard. Tianming had already sensed the clone with his haki, but kept quiet and calmly observed the projection, intrigued by the unique Nen ability. Chapter 39. Castro's Nen clone was condensing slowly. Tianming observed it carefully with his observation hockey. It took a full 10 seconds for the aura to pass through the wall and form a humanoid shape. With such a long formation time, it was obvious this ability had to be activated before battle. There was no way to summon it effectively during combat. Still, the clone's functions were impressive. Castro's real body was staying out of sight, but the clone was still observing the room. There were no cameras or sensors around, and Castro wasn't using N, which meant this clone likely shared vision with the original body. As Tianming analyzed the projection, Hisoka gave a lazy grin. "You're still so hot-tempered," he said, voice laced with mockery. "Seems like you've forgotten what it felt like to face me." "Hisoka, cut the crap." Castro's clone snapped, his expression darkening. "I may have lost to you back then, but I've never been afraid of you, not even once. Don't bother trying to mess with my head. This time, I'll defeat you and erase the shame you brought me." Hisoka just chuckled, his silence full of contempt. Castro, angered by the reaction, exhaled sharply and forced himself to calm down. His breath steadied, though his voice was still cold. "What do you want?" As he spoke, he cast a few quick glances toward Tianming. He wasn't sure what Hisoka was planning, but given Hisoka's nature, he didn't expect anything good. And anyone Hisoka brought along was unlikely to be much better. Hisoka smiled. "I came to cancel our duel." That sentence landed like a thunderclap. Castro was stunned, and even Tianming raised an eyebrow. Hisoka hadn't mentioned anything about canceling a fight. What was he scheming? "Hisoka, what the hell do you mean?" Castro growled. "I've been preparing to take you down for 2 years. Are you saying you're backing out now? Are you scared?" Castro's fists were clenched, his knuckles turning white. He had trained relentlessly, fought countless opponents, and focused all of it on a singular goal: revenge. When Hisoka agreed to the rematch over a month ago, he'd finally seen a path forward, to overcome his trauma, to defeat the one who humiliated him. Now, Hisoka was trying to just walk away. "You have no idea how many people are betting on this fight," Castro said coldly. "If you back out now, assassins will be lining up to kill you. You'll die a dog's death in some alley, hunted by mercenaries who don't even care who you are." Hisoka gave a wistful smile. "Someone already tried that. A hired killer stalked me for over a month. I got bored, so I tracked down his employer and killed them instead. Honestly, I kind of miss being hunted." Hisoka's eyes softened with nostalgia, recalling the thrill of Illumi's twisted assassination games. He looked back at Castro with a sigh. "You used to be talented. A sweet, rare fruit. But 2 years have passed, and instead of ripening, you've just soured. You're no longer worth tasting. I became dozens of times stronger just to defeat you," Castro hissed, his nen flaring wildly. His long white hair whipped around him like a demon emerging from hell. Tianming watched silently. He understood now, Hisoka wasn't actually trying to cancel the fight. He was baiting Castro, rattling his focus, provoking him into becoming the perfect opponent. Just as expected, Hisoka went in for the final push. "This guy here," Hisoka said, pointing at Tianming, "is named Zhao Tianming. He's only been learning Nen for 2 months, and already his strength surpasses yours. You've trained for 2 whole years and still can't match him. So what gives you the right to challenge me?" Castro's gaze shifted to Tianming. He could feel a subtle pressure from the other man, but Hisoka's words were too much. "Surpassed me? In 2 months?" Castro sneered. "You think I'm that gullible? Training Nen isn't easy. I've fought endlessly and refined my abilities over years. And this guy, this smug-faced nobody, surpassed me in 2 months? Please." Before he could finish, Tianming and Hisoka disappeared from their positions, appearing right in front of the clone. Caught off guard, the clone hesitated for a fraction of a second, long enough for Castro's real body to reflexively jump back, widening the distance. Now able to see clearly, he realized Tianming's fist had stopped just inches from the clone's face. Hisoka had casually grabbed Tianming's wrist mid-swing, Careful, Hisoka said, raising an eyebrow. If you fight here, you'll be disqualified. Save it for somewhere off the radar. Out of sight, out of trouble. Even as he spoke, Hisoka was eyeing Tianming carefully. Was he cooperating in the act? Or was he actually about to punch Castro's clone for real? Tianming shook Hisoka's hand off and scoffed. It's just a clone. Even if I destroy it, it won't affect the real one. Doesn't count as a private fight. At best, it's like swatting a fly. The clone gritted its teeth at that. Seconds later, it dissolved back into raw aura. Then, the room's door swung open, and Castro himself stepped out, face dark and brooding. If I defeat him, he said quietly, will you drop this nonsense and honor our duel? Hisoka still had his back to him, but in the shadow of his turned face, a smirk curved at the corner of his mouth. Success. Turning around, Hisoka replied casually, if you can beat Tianming, I'll not only go through with our fight. I'll even put 10 billion jenny on the line. Sound good? I accept, Castro said without hesitation. But let's be clear. If this is a private fight, I'm not holding back. If he dies, he dies. With that, he turned to Tianming, his eyes sharp as knives. So? What's it going to be? If you don't dare, say it now. Because once this starts, there's no turning back. Tianming didn't hesitate. This was exactly what he came here for, to fight Castro and gain insight for constructing his own Nen ability. There was no reason to back down. I accept. Chapter 40. Sky Arena, Underground Parking Lot, B2. Despite the Sky Arena's global fame, few visitors arrived by car. Most came in via airship, so the underground parking lot was almost always deserted. With so little traffic, the area had fallen into disrepair. Over 90% of the ceiling lights were broken. No one bothered to fix them. The space was nearly pitch black, lit only by a few scattered, flickering bulbs that dotted the gloom. In the southwest corner of the lot, Tianming and Castro stood facing each other. Between them stood Hisoka, smirking mischievously. This place is perfect, Hisoka said, looking around. Barely anyone comes down here. Veteran fighters who know the terrain use it for private duels all the time. Ideal battlefield. He paused and added with a grin, just remember, while most of the security cameras are broken, a few still work. If you get caught on one, someone will come down to investigate. If that happens, you'll both be disqualified. Castro scoffed. Doesn't matter. There aren't any working cameras nearby. I just need to kill Tianming before anyone notices. Tianming closed his eyes. Then, boom, boom, boom. In a chain reaction, the surveillance cameras around the underground garage began exploding, one by one, starting from the far side and progressing toward them. Glass shattered and debris scattered as each camera was obliterated. The final one near their location burst in a loud pop, and Tianming opened his eyes. Don't worry about being seen, he said calmly. Let's fight. Hisoka burst into laughter. You're wild. I don't even know how you did that, but now someone will definitely come check. You'd better finish this fast. With that, he released the Nen thread anchoring him to the floor, and a burst of aura behind him launched him like a cannonball out of the combat zone. The referee had exited. The fight was officially on. Castro made the first move. He left a Nen clone behind and dashed forward, his real body aiming a heavy punch straight at Tianming's face. It landed hard. Even Tianming felt a sharp sting across his cheek. Realizing his opponent wasn't bluffing, Tianming immediately wrapped his body in aura. He swung his right fist in a clean arc, intercepting the punch head-on. Boom. A shockwave erupted through the underground garage. The concrete cracked under their feet, spreading in a spiderweb pattern. Both fighters were knocked backward. Tianming took 3 steps back and slammed a foot down to regain stability. Castro was sent flying back dozens of meters, flipping in the air before finally skidding to a stop. He stared at Tianming, stunned. That strength. It's beyond anything I expected. The collision had shaken him to his core. The amount of aura Tianming had was monstrous. But Castro noticed something else. Tianming's aura control was rough. His finesse was lacking. So maybe Hisaka was right, this guy really was a newcomer who had only recently awakened Nen. But still, with this sheer volume of aura, he could easily bulldoze weaker opponents, even without finesse. Castro clenched his fist, pain shooting through his hand. I can't fight this guy head-on. I'll have to outsmart him. Meanwhile, Tianming noticed that Castro didn't follow up after the attack. Without a word, he vanished. In a blink, he reappeared directly in front of Castro, index finger extended like a spear, aimed at Castro's heart. The speed was terrifying. Castro's scalp went numb. He instinctively threw up his right hand to parry. The palm strike was rushed, lacking power. It failed to redirect the attack, but that wasn't his goal. He used the recoil to push his body sideways. Tianming's Shigan, finger gun, whistled past his shoulder, ripping through his cloak. Tear. The cloak shredded into pieces, fluttering to the floor. Castro had narrowly avoided death, but managed to gain distance. His heart was pounding. That move. That wasn't just physical speed. It had to be some kind of technique. He was right. Tianming hadn't used the Nen ability, but rather one of the 6 styles, specifically Saru, Shave, amplified with Nen. Since arriving in this world, Tianming had studied ways to reduce the strain the 6 styles placed on the body. At first, he had no choice but to raise his physical stats and brute force it. But after learning Nen, he realized that aura could serve as the perfect energy source. With enough control, he could use Nen alone to power the 6 styles, with minimal damage to his body. For trained Nen users, the backlash was nearly non-existent. The downside? Massive aura consumption. Most Nen users couldn't afford to use it often. But Tianming, with his overwhelming reserves, could do it almost freely. As he studied Castro's defensive stance, Tianming narrowed his eyes, slightly disappointed. Just like Wing said. When enhancers try to branch into other categories, their effectiveness drops. Even with strong aura, Castro's split focus is holding him back. If Castro had gone all in on enhancer-type combat, his earlier palm strike might have knocked away Tianming's finger thrust. He might have even countered. Maybe specialization really is the key. As Tianming pondered the direction of his own Nen development, a sudden gust of wind blew in from behind. He turned, instincts flaring, and focused his aura into his right fist, punching straight toward the wind's source. Boom. His fist collided with Castro's tire-bite fist, a powerful, aura-boosted strike. Tianming's eyes narrowed, pupils shrinking in shock. This wasn't Castro's real body. It was a clone. And yet, the force behind the punch felt completely real. Tianming had been tracking Castro's main body ever since he released the clone. He was sure this was just a projection. But after exchanging blows with it, he knew something was wrong. Chapter 41. Tianming's right fist clashed with the palms of Castro's clone. Though his technique was called tire-bite fist, the actual motion was more akin to a claw strike than a punch. Caught off guard, Tianming responded instinctively, defending mid-ambush. For a moment, he was evenly matched with the clone. But the moment Tianming regained his balance, the tide shifted. He abandoned the power struggle and, like a serpent, coiled around the clone's palm with his own arm, then clamped down on the clone's wrist like a vice. Castro's clone instantly tried to break free, but no matter how hard it twisted, Tianming's grip didn't budge. His hands felt like iron clamps, immovable. With his opponent's arms locked down, Tianming lifted his leg and unleashed a storm kick, a blade of aura-laced force slicing through the air. Swoosh! The arc swept clean across the clone's waist. Castro's projection split cleanly in two before collapsing into aura particles, fading away with a shiver of fear on its fragmented face. It all happened in an instant. Tianming immediately turned around, scanning the area behind him. Castro was gone. He had clearly taken the opportunity to vanish the moment Tianming destroyed the clone, likely hiding nearby, waiting for the perfect angle to strike. Tianming's face hardened. He shelved the cockiness he'd been carrying earlier. He had always known that in the world of hunters, raw aura alone wasn't everything. Still, His naturally enormous nen reserves made him prone to recklessness. But after that ambush, he couldn't afford to be careless anymore. Castro didn't have his power, but he clearly had the technique to threaten him. A mistake could cost him everything. Just as Tianming prepared to search the shadows, footsteps echoed in the distance. Someone was coming. The sounds approached quickly. Tianming recognized them, likely a Skyrena search team. While he wasn't afraid of them, he also didn't want to stir up unnecessary trouble. He still had plans for this tower. Better not to get disqualified just yet. He immediately activated in, concealing his aura completely and blending into the darkness, a vital advanced technique for any enhancer-type Nen user. Moments later, 5 figures emerged into view. All of them wore dark, military-style uniforms with radios and chest-mounted law enforcement recorders. These weren't your average staff, they were Skyrena's internal enforcers. Tianming narrowed his eyes. All 5 of them are Nen users. And they're not weak. This development complicated things. While Tianming had been confident of defeating Castro, now they were both at risk of disqualification. If the law enforcement team saw their faces or captured any evidence on their recorders, they were done. He weighed his options. Should I kill them? It would be simple. Wipe them out, destroy the recordings, and leave no evidence. Even if someone suspected him, no one could prove it. But that thought was gone as quickly as it came. He had no grudge with these people. If worst came to worst, he'd rather withdraw from the tournament than commit murder over something so petty. Still, doing nothing wasn't a solution either. These 5 wouldn't leave just because he wanted them to. If they started a full area search, eventually, he'd be found. TCH. I brought this on myself. He sighed inwardly. Trying to act cool in front of Hisoka and Castro. Blowing up all the cameras like a damn show-off. Serves me right. He glanced around. Castro has to be nearby. He wouldn't abandon the fight. He's probably hiding, using in like I am. They were now in the same boat. If he could coordinate with Castro, even temporarily, they could avoid detection and deal with the search team without conflict. But just as he was about to move, clack! A small stone landed at Tianming's feet. The sound was faint, but in the silent underground parking lot, it echoed like a gunshot. Dean, the man leading the 5-member team, had a military-style crew cut and a calm, hardened demeanor. When he heard that all surveillance cameras on B2 had gone down at once, he immediately sealed all exits and headed down with his elite crew. He'd assumed it was a mechanical failure, maybe a severed cable. But as soon as they arrived, he realized something much bigger was going on. Every camera was destroyed, not damaged by time or wear, but blasted apart. The destruction appeared internal, as if struck from within by a focused energy. Nen. Someone had used Nen, no question about it. There were dozens of cameras on this floor. Only a Nen user could have systematically destroyed them all in moments. That meant one thing. A private fight. Dean wasn't new to this. He had once been a high-ranking fighter in the Skyrena himself. After nearly dying in the ring, he retired and became a staffer, but never forgot how dangerous fighters could be. And if 2 Nen users were battling in the dark, with unknown abilities, it wasn't just dangerous, it was suicidal to charge in. He considered the situation carefully. We're exposed. They're hiding. If they feel cornered, they'll team up and wipe us out before we blink. Instead of fanning out to search all 9 zones of the garage, Dean decided to slow things down. If they searched as a group and left a few blind spots, it would give the Nen users a way to escape, no need to push them into a corner. Worst case, the higher-ups would dock his pay. Better that than get someone killed. Still, just in case. He spread his palm and focused his aura. A set of pink, glowing handcuffs materialized in his hand. This was his Nen ability, Pink Justice. Its effect was simple but powerful. If he asked someone a question and they told the truth, he could place a cuff on their body. If done within an hour of the answer, the target would be frozen, unable to use Nen. It was his ace for neutralizing hostile Nen users, non-lethal, but effective. As he passed the cuffs to his team, A sound made him freeze. Clack. A stone hit the ground. From the right. He turned sharply, eyes narrowing. Who's there? Chapter 42. The 5 search team members radiated a visible glow of aura. They had all entered Ren state, gathering their nen in preparation for immediate combat. Though Ren and Ken were similar in their fundamental use, their purposes were different. Ken focused on defense, fortifying the user's body, while Ren amplified raw offensive power. None of these enforcers had mastered Go or any advanced combinations yet, so they stuck with simple Ren to ready themselves. At the front, Dean frowned deeply, his brow scrunched into the shape of the kanji for river. He cursed the person who'd made the noise behind the pillar to the 18th generation of their family. He had originally planned to let them go. But now? Someone decided to make a sound and expose their presence, while the body cams were rolling. Now they couldn't pretend they hadn't heard anything. Damn bastard. If I catch him, I'll beat him senseless before I drag him out of here. The 5 of them slowly formed a loose formation and approached the pillar, carefully moving from light into shadow. The area was dim, and the tension thick. If the person behind the pillar doesn't come out, Dean said calmly, we'll be forced to act. A pause. No response. Dean raised his hand to give the signal. Wait. Don't shoot. I'm coming out. An obscenely casual voice echoed from behind the stone pillar. Then a middle-aged man waddled into view. Dean and the others sucked in a breath. They had never, in their entire lives, seen someone so ugly. He looked about 40. His stubbly face was greasy, and his receding hairline had fully given way to a shining bald spot that glinted under the sparse lights. His body was obese, his belly jiggled with every step, and his mismatched facial features made him look broken. Crooked mouth. Slanted eyes. Fat rolls spilling from an ill-fitting martial arts uniform. Dean narrowed his eyes. There was no nen aura on this man, at least, none that he could detect. But that didn't mean anything. The man could be using Zetsu, hiding his presence. So Dean kept his distance. Stand there. Don't move, Dean ordered coldly. Just answer my questions. If you lie, I'll kill you on the spot. The bald man raised his hands in surrender. I'll be honest, he said. Name. Why are you here? What did you see? The man swallowed hard. My name's Green. I came with some friends on an airship to watch a few matches. Got lost, wandered down here by mistake. While I was looking for an exit, I heard some explosions. The surveillance cameras started blowing up. Scared the hell out of me. Dean nodded slowly. Then, he gestured toward the man's martial arts uniform. What's with your clothes? At that moment, Green glanced down. And Tianming's heart sank. That's right, the man calling himself Green was Tianming in disguise. By using Life Return, a skill that could be unlocked after mastering the 6 styles, he had altered his body's structure to impersonate someone else. The ability let users fully control their muscles, organs, fat, even hair. It could store nutrients to accelerate healing, and in Tianming's case, even change his appearance. But it only changed his body, not his clothes. In his rush to master the transformation, he'd forgotten to change into something more fitting. His disguise was a dumpy middle-aged loser, yet he was wearing a fighter's black and white martial arts uniform. It was a dead giveaway. I'm a martial arts enthusiast, Tianming said awkwardly. I'm a fan of a certain fighter, so I wear his outfit. You know, cosplay. Dean nodded again, though his frown deepened. He weighed the pink justice cuffs in his hand, still suspicious. Then his eyes lit up with inspiration. He stared directly at Tianming and asked, Did you drop the stone just now? Tianming frowns. He wanted to deny it, but that wouldn't make sense. In truth, he had no idea who dropped it. His first guess had been Castro, but on second thought, that was unlikely. Castro was in just as much danger of being caught. There was no reason he'd purposely expose them both. Which left only one suspect. Hisoka. That bastard. You sick little clown. You just had to stir the pot. You wanted chaos. I swear, one day I'm gonna rip out your intestines and make you eat them. Still, Tianming knew better than to shift blame. In his current disguise, it was safer to play the part of the clueless dumbass. He sighed, then nodded. Yeah, that was me. I accidentally kicked the stone while I was hiding. My bad. Dean's eyes narrowed. He adjusted the pink justice handcuffs again and muttered internally. He's been lying since the first sentence. Even that, I'll be honest, was a lie. Dean's Nen ability had a built-in lie detector. If the subject gave even one truthful answer, he could activate the cuff's full effect. So far, nothing. Tianming hadn't told the truth once. Is this guy a manipulator? Or maybe a conjurer? Either way, he's dangerous. Time to try something different. Have you eaten today? Dean asked casually. Tianming blinked. What kind of weird question is that? Yeah, I ate this morning, he said without thinking. Dean's eyes lit up. Bingo. That was a truthful answer. The ability was now primed. Dean grinned like a flower blooming in spring. Well, it's almost lunchtime. You must be starving. Come with us to the office. We'll get you something to eat and call your friends to pick you up. Tianming, still playing the clueless role, smiled dumbly, but inside, he was uneasy. There was something about Dean that gave him a bad feeling. He couldn't put his finger on it, but alarms were ringing in his gut. Still, he followed, staying cautious. He kept his Zetsu active, concealing his aura, but he had his haki at the ready. After all, the fight with Castro had been strictly Nen-based. He hadn't even tapped into haki yet. Now, with things getting risky, it was time to stay sharp. As they neared the group, one of the younger enforcers suddenly moved, striking from behind. Chapter 43. Boom. Tianming raised his arm and blocked the incoming punch from the thin youth. With his observation haki always active, he had already sensed the hostile intent coming. The force of the blow, however, surprised him. A burning pain spread through his arm. This scrawny kid doesn't look like much. But his strength is insane. In fact, Tianming could tell, the opponent's raw power even surpassed Castro's. He was most likely an enhancer. As soon as he landed and steadied himself, two more Surge team members flanked him from both sides. Each held a pair of glowing pink handcuffs. Tianming had sensed something strange about those cuffs earlier. He now realized they were part of a special Nen ability. As they closed in, trying to clamp the cuffs on him, Tianming acted first. He clenched his right fist, infused it with power, and launched a punch at one of them, aimed straight for the chest. Shigan, cannon fist. Boom. The blow landed with a dull, heavy crack. The man vomited blood midair and was sent flying like a cannonball, crashing into the distance. Without pausing, Tianming swept a roundhouse kick at the other enforcer. But that one had learned from his teammate's fate. He flipped backward in time, narrowly dodging the strike. Gritting his teeth, he looked toward the injured teammate and called out, "Liuluo, are you okay?" Liuluo, who was barely propping himself up on one elbow, wheezed out, "I'm not dead. Just be careful." Huff. He's an enhancer. Huff. And insanely strong. They didn't need the warning. Everyone had seen it clearly. Liuluo was a transmuter, capable of fighting on par with most enhancers in close combat. But he'd been knocked out of commission in a single blow. This fat, goofy-looking man was a monster. Dean, the team leader, quickly dragged Liuluo to safety, then faced Tianming and declared, "Green, you are hereby permanently stripped of your right to compete in the Sky Arena. Surrender immediately and prepare for judgment." Tianming cracked his neck, unfazed. "Oh? If I've already lost my qualifications, then I'm no longer your responsibility. I'll just walk out of here, and you can't stop me. As for your friend," I held back. "He won't die, he'll just be out of commission for a while." Indeed, a Nen user's vitality was much higher than a regular person's. Spitting blood might be fatal for ordinary folks, but someone like Liuluo would recover in a few weeks. Tianming had already decided, once he exited the Sky Arena, he'd revert to his original form and return when things cooled down. But Dean wasn't letting him go. "You violated the arena's gladiator contract. You'll be detained in our holding facility until a professional hunter from the association arrives for judgment. Tianming sighed. Guess we're doing this the hard way. He dropped into a fighting stance, eyes locking onto Dean. He's the leader. If I want to break through, I'll have to take him out first. Swoosh. In a flash, Tianming vanished from his spot and reappeared in front of Dean like a ghost. Dean's eyes widened in horror. He had maintained what he thought was a safe distance, but Tianming's speed was inhuman. Before he could react, Tianming's fist filled his entire vision. The wind pressure alone cut his face like blades. Dean knew full well, he couldn't tank this hit. His specialty wasn't direct combat. Not against an enhancer. His only option was to try grabbing Tianming's wrist and redirect the blow. But he was too slow. Bang! Tianming's punch struck Dean square in the face, sending him flying like a rag doll. He crashed hard to the ground, unconscious, eyes rolled back. "Captain!" the thin boy shouted in rage. He was close to Dean. The captain treated them like comrades, and watching him get knocked out like that ignited a fire in his heart. He charged forward, fists raised. Tianming gathered both Hockey and Nen, but suddenly, his expression changed. His Nen wasn't responding. He looked down, and saw a pink handcuff locked around his right wrist. Damn! Dean managed to cuff me during that final exchange. So even though Dean had been knocked out, he'd succeeded in sealing Tianming's aura, a parting shot that only a seasoned Nen user could pull off. As the realization hit, the thin boy's fist came flying in. With Nen sealed, Tianming relied entirely on his arm and Hockey to block. The punch slammed into his forearm, forcing him backward. His feet dragged across the ground, leaving 2 long skid marks. But the thin boy didn't stop. He followed up with a flurry of punches, his fists blurring into after-images. Tianming was pushed back again and again, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. But he wasn't panicking. He just needed to adapt. Once he locked onto the rhythm of the thin boy's movements, he began blocking effectively, then countered. Slowly, the momentum shifted. The thin boy's strikes began to slow. Tianming's counterattacks grew fiercer. Before long, the thin boy was pushed on the defensive, retreating under the relentless pressure. The other 2 enforcers watched with wide eyes. They had seen Dean's ability activate. The pink justice cuffs were clearly latched onto Tianming. That meant his Nen should have been sealed, rendering him helpless. So, how was he still fighting so well? The thin boy, distracted by the realization, left a hole in his defense. Tianming capitalized immediately, slamming a fist into the boy's face and sending him reeling. But he didn't stop there. He lunged, grabbed the boy by the shoulder, and raised a fist to finish it. Just then, whoosh! A golden rope dropped from above like a lasso. Thick as a thumb, it had a loop 2 meters wide, aimed to capture both of them at once. Tianming's eyes sharpened. Paper art. His body bent unnaturally, flattening like a sheet of paper as he fell backward. The rope loop brushed past his nose, missing him by inches. He flipped back, creating distance. Only now did he spot the 4th Surge team member, previously idle, who had been preparing that attack all along. Chapter 44. You dodged my rope like a sheet of paper. Is that your Nen ability? Simon asked calmly, still holding the golden lasso in his hand. He had refrained from joining the battle until now, hoping to end things with a single sneak attack using his Hatsu. But he hadn't expected that this supposedly clumsy fat man would turn his body as soft and fluid as paper, sliding right past the rope. Could that strange movement be part of his Nen ability? From what Simon had seen during the fight with Ruby, the thin, wiry enhancer, the man possessed not only speed and strength, but also impressive durability. If that paper-like evasion technique was indeed an Nen ability, then this ugly guy was seriously troublesome. But something else puzzled Simon even more. Tianming was already wearing the pink justice handcuff, Dean's materialized Nen ability. Once applied, it should have forcibly placed him in a state of Zetsu, unable to access his aura. In theory, Ruby should have easily overwhelmed him. But Ruby hadn't gained the upper hand. How? Simon thought. How can someone without Nen still hold their ground against a trained enhancer? While Simon analyzed the situation, Ruby, still dangling by Simon's rope, shouted irritably, "Simon! What are you spacing out for? Let me down already." Simon frowned but obeyed. With a tug of the rope, Ruby's stiff body was dragged toward him like a puppet. Once close, Simon bent down and began to untie him, eyes still locked on Tianming. Strangely, Tianming made no move to capitalize. Instead, he was fiddling with the pink handcuff on his right wrist, expression unreadable. He tugged and twisted, even tried thinning his wrist using life return, a technique from his Six Styles training, but the cuffs shrank in tandem. No matter how he tried, he couldn't get free. Just like the unremovable headband, the Nen ability responded dynamically. It was locked tight. Finally, Tianming raised his hand and shook the cuff lazily. "Hey! How do you take this thing off?" Simon finished untying Ruby and replied flatly, "Only the captain can deactivate it. But don't worry, it's time limited. It'll dissolve automatically in 24 hours. Tianming frowned. He'd already guessed that Dean was likely a conjurer, his ability materialized objects, and users like that could typically sense where their creations were. Which meant he'd have to leave the Sky Arena within 24 hours, or Dean might find him again. But that was a problem for later. Right now, he looked up at Simon. "So, what now? Are we still fighting?" Simon didn't answer. Instead, he silently tightened the golden rope in his hand. He, Ruby, and the third remaining enforcer surrounded Tianming in a pin formation, blocking all escape routes. Their actions spoke clearly enough. Tianming's eyes swept the three. Ruby, clearly an enhancer. Pure strength, relentless fists, close-range brute force. Simon, likely a manipulator. His golden lasso had already proven dangerous, and even Ruby had been immobilized by it. If Tianming got caught, escape was not guaranteed. The third enforcer, the large man who had yet to use Nen, was the most concerning. His ability was still a mystery. His silence was strategic. He was waiting. Tianming took a deep breath. In the One Piece world, hockey could sometimes overcome even devil fruit rules. But this isn't that world. Here, even the strongest must respect certain constraints, unless you're someone like Meruem. He knew he wasn't at that level yet. The trio moved at once. Ruby and the burly man attacked from opposite directions, coordinated, synchronized. Tianming dodged between them like a shadow, then threw a punch at the burly man's chest. He had to force the man to reveal his Nen ability. The man crossed his arms defensively. Boom. The impact sent him skidding backward, arms visibly shaking from the shock. He didn't counterattack. Not an enhancer, Tianming noted. If he were, that block would have been solid. Which means, he's likely a specialist or someone with a dangerous hotsa hidden under the surface. Not good. That left two attackers, Ruby and the unknown one, fighting up close. The trio entered into a full-blown melee. Ruby's fists flew like daggers. The burly man, though cautious, provided backup. Tianming was calm under pressure, moving with precision and blocking cleanly. Even while restricted by the pink justice handcuff, he kept pace. But Ruby noticed something. The pink handcuff on Tianming's wrist, it had a second cuff still dangling freely. And suddenly, a crazy idea formed in his mind. If I can clamp the second cuff onto my own wrist, he thought, I could lock us together. Tianming would be restricted further, limited in movement and unable to use his evasive, paper-like dodging technique. Simon's rope would land for sure next time. But it was risky. He'd have to get very close. He might succeed, but he'd be right in range of Tianming's devastating fists. Still, if I back down here, what kind of fighter am I? Tianming's very existence shook him. He'd always seen himself as one of the elite among enhancers, but now he was facing someone who still fought like a demon even with his aura sealed. Before the seal, Tianming had one-shot Dean, a conjurer, sure, but still no pushover. If I don't challenge him now, I'll never surpass him. With that, Ruby committed. He stepped in fast, grabbing Tianming's right arm and thrusting his wrist toward the empty half of the handcuff. He reached his own hand toward it, aiming to latch it. But in that moment, Ruby froze. A chill ran down his spine. Goosebumps erupted across his skin. Something's wrong. Tianming twisted his wrist, and the dangling handcuff, through sheer inertia, flipped around and clicked shut on Tianming's own wrist. Clack. Now both cuffs were locked on the same person. Ruby's bold gamble had failed. And now, he stood wide open, with no guard. Tianming's eyes flashed cold. Chapter 45. Puff. Ruby spat out a mouthful of blood, then collapsed heavily to the ground, his eyes rolled back. Tianming let out a sigh of relief. The toughest opponent was finally down. This enhancer-type guy had been hounding him since the beginning of the fight. He could both take hits and dish them out. Winning a team battle would have been nearly impossible without taking him out first. Looking from the other side's perspective, Tianming couldn't help feeling a little impressed. Enhancement really was the best type for close-quarters combat. It seemed basic, almost like a blank slate, but once a fight started, it was like a dogskin plaster, you just couldn't shake it off. Staring at the unconscious, badly injured Ruby, Tianming let out a small laugh. Comparing him to Bushido made him realize the importance of crafting a nen ability that truly suited him. The combat of nen users wasn't just about theory. He used to think that guys like Wing were too rigid, that's why they went the enhancer route. But now, it seemed like he had just been too clever for his own good. The theory of the 6 major nen types had existed in the hunter world for centuries. It wasn't something developed in isolation in a study, it came from countless real battles, trial and error, and the hard-won insights of many nen users. Bushido's nen ability certainly added versatility to his fighting style, but in doing so, he lost the core advantage of being an enhancer. Objects conjured by conjurers embodied rules. Some of those rules were so absolute that even someone as powerful as the Chimera Ant King had to obey them. That was a strength Bushido's clones could never match. From what Tianming observed, Ruby didn't have as much raw talent as Bushido, but he dedicated himself fully to enhancement. While he lacked adaptable techniques, his performance in actual combat far exceeded that of his more versatile opponent. There was also a hidden upside. Enhancers were generally the kind of people who, as Tianming put it, have a rectum directly connected to their brain, and poop as much as they eat. They're not the type to set up traps or engage in rule-based mind games. Giving up the advantages of enhancement meant giving up their edge and stepping right into the enemy's playing field. In the end, they'd just get picked apart by tactics, just like how Bushido lost to Hisoka. Thinking of this, he smiled at the fallen Ruby. If it weren't for him, he might have gone too far down the wrong path and tried to build some half-baked conjurer ability he had no business using. Plus, the kid had guts. Even knowing there was a huge gap in strength between them, he never backed down. That kind of courage alone was worthy of respect. He shouted in his heart, "Little brother, your courage is admirable. I, Tianming, recognize you. You are a true martial artist." Click. Just as he was patting himself on the back mentally, he suddenly felt a chill on his left wrist. Looking down, he saw a pair of pink handcuffs fastened to it. The other end was already clipped to the right hand of a brawny man. Tianming had let his guard down for a split second, and this guy had jumped him. The muscular man grinned. "You're not going anywhere now. Get ready to die." The moment he finished speaking, he charged at Tianming, clamped down on his wrist with his right hand, and started hammering him with his left fist. The ferocious blows forced Tianming to retreat step by step. Taking advantage of the opening, the big guy shouted, "Simon! What are you waiting for? Do it!" A golden light shot out from a dark corner, hovered above both Tianming and the brute, then dropped straight down, trying to capture them both. Tianming was stunned. At this point, he had no energy left to block the brute's blows. His only option now was to go all in on offense. He channeled all his haki into his right fist, abandoned defense completely, and threw a punch straight into the guy's gut. Puff. The brute vomited blood all over Tianming's face, but Tianming didn't care. Face drenched in red, eyes burning like hellfire, he looked like a demon returned from the underworld. He followed up with a crushing uppercut to the man's jaw. The man's body snapped backward, feet stumbling a few steps before collapsing limply to the floor, unconscious. As he dropped, his right hand tugged Tianming's left wrist. It was a weak pull, normally nothing, but Tianming was already at his limit and staggered. His body now wasn't like the thick-skinned, resilient one he had in his past life as a pirate. After these back-to-back battles, his physical strength was nearly gone. That last counterattack had cost him dearly. He wanted to dodge the incoming golden rope, but he couldn't move at all. As he looked up helplessly, the golden rope looped around his waist. A powerful binding force locked his entire body in place. He couldn't even twitch a finger, completely at the mercy of others. For a moment, the underground parking lot fell deathly silent. The space that had just been filled with chaos and clamor was now eerily still. The silence only lasted about 2 minutes before Simon stepped out from the shadows, holding the golden rope. I really didn't expect that this sleazy fat guy named Green was this strong, Tianming thought bitterly. If my ability didn't counter enhancement, this fight could have gone either way. Simon didn't rush to finish Tianming off. Instead, he carefully examined the area, scanning the surroundings. Even though Tianming was immobilized, he could still use his observation haki and armament haki. His back was to Simon, but he could still track every one of his odd movements. Why isn't this guy coming over to finish me? Is he worried Bushido will ambush him? That was a possibility. While Simon might not know Bushido's identity, he probably sensed there was another Nen user in the parking lot. After all, this was a prearranged fight. It wouldn't make sense to come alone. But Simon was overthinking it if he expected Bushido to come to the rescue. Tianming had burned through too much energy in the last battle, and now the range of his observation haki was much smaller than usual. And Bushido wasn't even within range. He'd likely slipped away during the fight. They weren't allies, he wouldn't stick around, much less risk his life to help. Tianming gradually calmed down. Though he was captured, it didn't necessarily mean death. He had held back earlier. The 4 members of the security team were still alive, just seriously injured. Even if he was tried, the worst outcome would be losing his right to participate in the Sky Arena. Maybe a fine. That kind of punishment? He could live with it. Just as he was thinking this, Simon finally moved. He reached for the law enforcement recorder on his chest, removed it, and, much to Tianming's surprise, smashed it into pieces. Chapter 46. Tianming was confused by Simon's actions, but what happened next made his pupils contract sharply. Simon started walking, but not toward Tianming. Instead, he went straight to Dean, who had been unconscious for half the day. Simon looked down at Dean, lying flat on the ground with his eyes closed. Although seriously injured, his chest was still faintly rising and falling. Simon narrowed his eyes, gathered energy into his right fist, and slammed it down. Tianming, observing with his observation haki, was stunned. He watched Simon strike the unconscious Dean multiple times, each blow heavy and deliberate, until Dean's heartbeat finally stopped. Only then did Simon pull his hand back. Why is this guy attacking his own teammate? What kind of illness is he suffering from? After confirming Dean's death, Simon let out a breath and his face filled with smug satisfaction. He had hated Captain Dean for a long time. He was stronger, more capable, and had better leadership skills than Dean, but the higher-ups had it out for him and refused to let him take over as captain. He'd thought about eliminating Dean before, but the search team always worked in pairs or groups, so there was never a chance. Now, with all 5 members except himself unconscious, the opportunity had finally come. All he had to do was kill Dean, pin the blame on this fat guy, and then kill the fat guy to clean up the evidence. No. It's not even a setup, Simon told himself. That fat guy named Green just happened to kill Dean in the middle of the battle. They were enemies, it's perfectly reasonable. He turned to Tianming. The next step was simple, kill this guy. Once Tianming was dead, there'd be no one left who knew what had happened. Simon walked behind Tianming, holding the rope in one hand. With his right fist, he poured in mental energy and struck. Boom! A dull thud echoed out as Simon's punch landed squarely on Tianming's back. He expected the blow to crush his opponent's heart instantly. But instead, something happened that shattered his worldview. His punch landed clean, but did no damage. In fact, a searing pain shot through Simon's own fist. He yanked it back in horror. His right hand was red and swollen, like he just slammed it into solid steel. What the hell? The guy had clearly been restrained, how could he still have such high defense? Looking more closely, Simon noticed the pink handcuffs on Tianming's wrists had vanished. That meant his Nen suppression had been lifted. Sure, in the hunter world there was the concept of post-mortem Nen, a kind of bug where Nen could become stronger after death, but that only applied to users who died with powerful grudges or unresolved desires. Dean clearly didn't have that level of hatred for Tianming. But even so, Simon couldn't understand it. His Nen ability, Golden Cowboy in the City, should have completely immobilized a target wrapped in the rope. Not just their body, but also the flow of Nen energy. Earlier, Tianming's aura had clearly been in a dead state. Even if Pink Justice released him, he shouldn't have been able to recover this fast. So why could he still use Nen to defend himself? What Simon didn't know was that Tianming was currently in a state of full-body armament hockey defense. Simon's ability could restrict physical movement and aura flow, but it had no effect on his hockey. People can't imagine what they've never seen. When Simon developed his Nen, he believed that once someone's body and aura were locked, they'd be helpless, a lamb to the slaughter. He never imagined there could be a third energy source. Unwilling to accept this, Simon clenched his fist and swung again. But he didn't notice that the power behind his second punch was significantly weaker. The first blow had already left a psychological scar. He couldn't bring himself to go all in again. Bang! 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 He kept punching, dozens of times, but eventually stopped and looked at his bloodied hand. He slumped to the ground, looking utterly drained. He muttered, "Impossible. How is this possible? How can I not break his defense? This is absolutely impossible." Simon's whole worldview was collapsing. During the earlier fight, he'd stayed hidden in the shadows, using his ability from a safe distance. He assumed Ruby and the others were just weak, and that's why they couldn't beat this fat guy. He hadn't realized just how terrifying Tianming truly was. But now, his pride had been ground into dust. Even when Tianming was bound and unable to fight back, Simon still couldn't injure him. That kind of power gap made him feel like a total joke. He looked up at Tianming's back. At that moment, Tianming, still facing away, seemed like a mountain that blotted out the sky. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't move it. After a long pause, Simon stood back up. There was no retreat now. The fat guy knew he'd killed Dean. If he didn't silence him, it would all be over. He circled around and stood in front of Tianming. Taking a deep breath, he began to back away slowly while loosening the rope. He was planning to remove the restraint on Tianming's head to let him speak, but he didn't dare get too close. This guy was too dangerous. Simon backed up until he was about 20 meters away. Once he judged the distance was safe, he released the mental bind around Tianming's head. Tianming immediately took a deep breath. It felt like being submerged in concrete. Though he could still breathe, his chest had been compressed by an outside force. After all that intense fighting, the lack of oxygen was torture. After catching his breath, Tianming stared at Simon and sneered, "What's the matter? You couldn't break through my defense, so now you're hoping I'll just die from asphyxiation?" Simon scowled but forced himself to stay calm. "Let's make a deal. You know my secret, and I captured you alive. If you get handed over to the law enforcement department, my murder will be exposed, but you'll also be locked up in prison for psychics. How about we work together? I'll let you go, and you promise not to expose me." Tianming fell silent, pondering his options. If everything Simon said was true, cooperating might actually be the best choice. But Tianming wasn't an idiot. This guy had just murdered his own teammate without hesitation. There was no way he would let Tianming walk free unconditionally. Sure enough, Simon closed his eyes and summoned his nen. A thick golden rope appeared in his right hand, his ability taking shape. "This is my ability, Rope of Oath," Simon said. "As long as you wear it around your neck and agree to our deal, the ability activates. You'll swear not to harm me in any way. That includes revealing my secret or attacking me directly. If you break the oath, the Rope of Oath activates. It'll bind both your body and nen, and eventually, you'll starve to death because you won't even be able to eat. Once the vow is sealed, I'll let you go. From then on, we stay out of each other's way." Tianming didn't respond immediately. He just stared at Simon as he finished explaining the terms. Then, unable to hold it in anymore, he burst out laughing. Chapter 47. Tianming had no habit of putting his life, or his property, in the hands of others. And now, the guy in front of him couldn't even lay a finger on him. He'd have to be completely insane to agree to Simon's terms. Besides, the rope was ugly. Other people wore thick gold chains to show off. What did he have? A golden rope? No matter how you looked at it, it screamed news. Seeing Tianming mock him so casually, Simon's forehead veins popped with rage. "Shut up. Don't get cocky. You really think I can't kill you just because I tried negotiating?" He took a deep breath and growled, "This is your last chance. Agree to my terms and leave, or I'll use my trump card and kill you." Tianming used observation haki to probe Simon's emotional state, and to his surprise, the guy wasn't bluffing. He actually did have some kind of hidden weapon that posed a real threat. But Tianming didn't care. He, Tianming, had lived 3 lives and never once bowed to anyone, not to some clown like this. Even if it were the Lord of the world, a god, the leader of humanity, a moral paragon, or his own father threatening him, he still wouldn't back down. Simon, frustrated that the fat guy still refused to listen, scowled and sealed Tianming's voice again. If words don't work, then it's time. Simon reached into his coat and pulled out a leather case slightly larger than a wallet. Inside was a dagger, a deep, blood-red blade tucked into a case like it was hiding something dangerous. The blade was about 20 centimeters long. Its crimson surface glistened with a sharp sheen, and its dark red hilt was covered in sinister black carvings. This dagger was known as the price of thirst for blood. That had once been its nen ability, but now, the name belonged to the weapon itself. That's right. This dagger was the lingering manifestation of a nen user's will. Its form had been preserved by the immense spiritual power of its former owner, after death. Tianming was alarmed the instant he saw it. A strong sense of danger washed over him. This was a weapon that could actually hurt him. Even after opening the case, Simon hesitated. He didn't reach for the dagger right away. His face was tense, conflicted. He clearly didn't want to use it. But it was too late to turn back. He gritted his teeth and grabbed the hilt with his right hand. The moment he did, the blade came alive, like a hungry demon. Dozens of vein-like tendrils slithered out of the hilt and pierced Simon's arm, immediately sucking his blood. Simon's face turned pale as snow, but he forced out the words, "I found this in an underground ruin. Everyone in the expedition died, except me. No one knows I came back with this unparalleled magic weapon." Tianming activated full-body armament haki, and locked onto Simon with his observation haki. He couldn't afford to miss a single detail. Simon's expression was sickly, his grin twisted with bloodlust. "After studying it, I discovered its true name, the price of blood. It absorbs the user's blood to gain unmatched sharpness." Tianming's face grew more serious by the second. Simon went on, "I've always been cautious with this thing. I never use it unless I have no choice. But now, you've forced my hand. Don't blame me for being ruthless." Tianming didn't even blink. His only thought was, are you gonna do it or not? Because if you hesitate any longer, that thing's gonna suck you dry. And just like that, Simon moved. He flashed forward like lightning, the crimson blade slicing toward Tianming's heart like a streak of bloody light. Puff! Blood gushed from Tianming's mouth. The blood knife dug deep into his chest, and began draining his blood like a high-powered pump. It wasn't just Simon's blood it could drink, it could also suck blood from its victim. Simon let out a crazed laugh, like a demon who'd finally taken a soul. "You're dead. Fatty, you're really dead this time. You dared to go against me, Simon? You really thought you could?" Boom. Boom. Before he could finish, a violent force exploded from Tianming's chest and sent him flying like a cannonball. He slammed into a concrete pillar with bone-rattling force, nearly snapping it in half. The blood dagger was ripped from Tianming's body mid-air, falling to the ground with a ding-dang and reverting to its dormant form. The searing pain sent Tianming to the floor. He clutched his chest, face pale, blood pouring out. He couldn't even maintain the fat man's state of life return anymore. His body snapped back to his original form. That was way too close. I almost died right here. When the dagger had been about to pierce his heart, Tianming had used life return to forcibly shift his heart to another part of his chest, barely dodging a fatal blow. But even so, after the knife pierced him, it kept sucking blood. The sudden loss made it impossible to maintain his life return transformation. And yet, in that exact moment, he spotted an opening. The moment Simon activated the blood dagger, his control over his Nen weakened. His manipulation ability faltered. For just a split second, the aura coating his body flickered, and Tianming took his shot. He landed a devastating punch, powered by both Haki and Nen. But Tianming was exhausted. His energy reserves were nearly gone. If he were at full power, he could have ended this with a single blow. Simon was just a manipulator, after all. But now, all he could manage was a serious injury. The guy was still alive. Tianming used life return to stop the bleeding again, then staggered to his feet and stumbled over to the ruins where Simon had landed. The area was a mess, rubble everywhere. Simon was buried. Tianming dug out the largest piece of debris, and there Simon was, groaning beneath it, barely conscious. He was covered in blood, crushed by debris, unable to speak clearly. His eyes widened in horror when he saw Tianming, his body trembling, mouth letting out a helpless whoop. Tianming looked down and recognized that look instantly. He'd seen it countless times before, on the faces of pirates he'd killed in his past life. That expression of utter fear right before death. Tianming hated killing. Unless it was a do-or-die situation, he preferred to just break a few limbs and leave his enemies alive. But Simon had crossed a line. Looking at the man, still whimpering in fear, Tianming smiled faintly and said, "I never thought a worm like you would actually manage to hurt me this badly. Even Hisoka didn't get me like this. You can rest in peace now." And with that, under Simon's terrified gaze, Tianming raised his right palm. He pressed it against Simon's chest. And a cold light flashed in his eyes. Chapter 48. Simon's whimpering stopped abruptly. His arms dropped limply to the ground, motionless. With the final enemy defeated, Tianming had won the battle, but now wasn't the time to relax. There were likely still Sky Arena enforcers waiting outside the parking lot. He had to find a way to avoid them and get out quickly. But first, there was one thing left to do. He found the leather case Simon had used to store the blood knife, then carefully placed the weapon back inside. He had personally experienced the blade's terrifying power. The side effects were steep, but its lethality was no joke. With the knife secured, he left the battlefield and made his way toward the underground exit through which he had entered. If I'm right, he thought, there'll be enemies guarding the way out. Maybe they're not as strong as Simon and his crew, but with the shape I'm in, it won't be easy to deal with them. He considered using life return to disguise himself as Simon or one of the others, but his energy was nearly depleted. He no longer had the strength to maintain a transformation. Just as he was wondering how to leave without drawing attention, the exit light ahead grew brighter, and the person standing at the threshold made him frown. Bushidoro stood there, his body dusty and disheveled. He was blocking the way. If Tianming wanted out, he'd have to go through him. Tianming's pace slowed, and he eventually stopped 10 meters away. With the search team's leader and one of its members now dead, was Bushidoro really still clinging to their unfinished duel? Tianming was badly injured and had no strength left to fight, but the outcome of the match didn't matter to him anymore. He had only challenged Bushido in the first place to better understand how to construct an enhancement-type nen ability. And after everything that had happened, he'd already found his answer. Even if he admitted defeat now, he could accept that. Just as he was about to surrender, Bushido spoke first. "I lost. You're the winner, Zhao Tianming." Tianming raised an eyebrow at the unexpected words but didn't say much, until another voice made his pupils narrow sharply. "He's on the verge of collapse. You could beat him with a flick of your wrist. And you're just gonna let that go?" Tianming turned his head. There, leaning lazily against the wall in the brightly lit corridor behind Bushido, was Hisoka, idly shuffling poker cards in one hand. Bushido took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. "I already understand the difference in strength between us. My goal and training is to become stronger, not to defeat a worn-down opponent with cheap tricks. That would violate my martial arts principles." Tianming said nothing, but he looked at Bushido with newfound respect. Hisoka smirked, still trying to stir the pot. "Don't forget our little wager. If you beat Tianming now, not only do you get a 10 billion Jenny bonus, you'll also earn the right to fight me. If you forfeit now, I'll cancel our match. No rematch, no revenge. Your shot at me? Gone forever." Bushido turned and looked at Hisoka calmly. "I'll get my revenge on you. But I won't stain my martial path to do it. If I have to, I'll fight you to the death, outside of the Sky Arena's reach." Hisoka laughed knowingly, then shrugged. "Your call. Just a word of advice, don't be so stubborn. You've got talent, but not everything can be learned in isolation. Some truths can't be discovered without standing on the shoulders of others." With that, Hisoka vanished. Bushido stepped aside and gestured for Tianming to pass. Without hesitation, Tianming walked past him. Not long after entering the corridor, he found several bodies strewn across the floor, clearly killed not long ago. Judging by their uniforms, they were Sky Arena staff. And judging by the precision of the wounds, they'd been taken out by Hisoka. Dragging his broken body, Tianming stumbled out of the Sky Arena. The city surrounding it was called Valo City. Thanks to the constant activity at the Sky Arena, Valo's economy had flourished. Tianming located a small clinic in a quiet, out-of-the-way corner of the city. He bought some hemostatic and anti-inflammatory medicine, grabbed a few rolls of bandages, and slipped away from Valo City without looking back. Valo's under the Sky Arena's influence. "If I stay here, I'll be found. I just need to lay low for a while. Once the heat dies down, I'll be in the clear." He made his way to a remote, barren mountain range and found a cave just large enough to shelter him. A brown bear lived inside. He killed it with one punch, then collapsed onto a flat slab of stone and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. He woke up, who knows how much later, to the pain in his body and the gnawing hunger in his stomach. Groaning, he pulled out a lighter and lit a fire at the mouth of the cave. He fashioned a crude grill out of tree branches and began roasting bear meat. As it cooked, he used the supplies he'd bought to bandage himself up. This kind of scene was all too familiar to him. Back in the pirate world, he'd gone through countless battles like this. Even his final fight, before he was flung into this world, ended with him being beaten to death by Kaido. Compared to that, this was nothing. As he wrapped his wounds, he felt a strange sensation. It was hard to describe, like he'd stepped back into his past life. He shook the feeling off and grabbed a piece of roasted bear meat. Time to eat. As he chewed, he reflected on what he had gained from this battle. First and foremost, he now had clarity on how to construct his nen ability. The path followed by Bushido and even Netero, focusing on conjuration and strict constructs, wasn't suited for his fighting style. When he built his ability, it would center on enhancement, supported by transformation and emission. And then, there was something else, something even more satisfying. His Ryuo, a more advanced form of armament hockey that had been stagnant for years, had finally awakened. That breakthrough alone was worth more than any strategy or victory. After all, he had trained hockey for decades. He was far more proficient in it than in nen. In battle, it came naturally to rely on haki over nen. The meat was delicious. He devoured the entire bear, hundreds of kilograms, until all that remained was a skeleton. Even after breaking several trees to add firewood, it still wasn't enough to keep up with his appetite. But finally, he felt it, the feeling from his previous life. That post-battle feast, that deep exhaustion, that primal satisfaction. It was familiar. It was real. And it was intoxicating. Chapter 49. After an unknown amount of time, Tianming slowly woke up, crawling up from the ground and frowning at the pungent smell that filled the air around him. He vaguely remembered that before falling asleep, he had thrown the brown bear skin at the entrance of the cave. He didn't know how much time had passed, but now the smell of decay had filled the entire space. He sat up on the stone platform with the help of the wall, surprised as he noticed his physical condition. He remembered being seriously injured before he lost consciousness, several ribs broken, internal organs severely damaged, and a great deal of blood lost after being stabbed by the blood-stained knife. But now, upon waking, he found his injuries completely healed. Even his ribs had reconnected. Under the observation of his aura perception, there wasn't even a single crack left in the bones. It was as if they had never been broken. His recovery speed had surpassed the peak of his physical condition from his previous life. And considering his current physical state was not as strong as it had been then, this kind of healing was clearly not the result of natural regeneration. At that moment, a possibility struck him. Could this change be connected to his nen ability? He immediately sat cross-legged on the ground and used his aura to draw a 10-centimeter scratch across the back of his left hand. The scratch looked long but only affected the surface of the skin, not reaching the underlying muscle or blood vessels. Tianming did this to observe whether he had somehow acquired accelerated healing. However, after waiting for quite some time, he was disappointed. Even after an hour, the minor surface wound had not healed. The recovery rate was the same as that of an average nen user, nowhere near the dramatic improvement he had hoped for. Then he suddenly remembered something and reached into his pocket, pulling out a black plastic cake, a black mobile phone. The earlier battle had given him no time to worry about the items in his pocket. He had initially intended to check the time to figure out how long he'd been unconscious, but now the plan clearly wasn't going to work. However, the hunter license in his pocket was still intact. As expected of something issued by the Hunter Association, even after a fight with a powerful nen user, not even a corner of it had been damaged. He even briefly considered using the license as a weapon in the future. Unable to use the phone to check the time, he started thinking. He had eaten an entire bear before falling unconscious, pushing his body to store the energy from the meat in every cell. Now, much of that energy had been consumed. While healing from his injuries, his body had used energy at an unusually high rate. Based on a rough estimation, he figured he had been unconscious for about a week. Then he frowned again. His injuries had fully healed in just a week. He was certain he must have received some kind of treatment. There was no way his body could have recovered that fast on its own. His wounds had healed rapidly while he was unconscious, but now that he was awake, his healing speed was back to normal. Could it be he had awakened the sleeping Arhat fist, healing faster only when dreaming? Just then, he touched the bandages wrapped around his body, and a strange idea popped into his head. He took out a half-used roll of medical bandages from his supplies and wrapped it around the scratch on his arm. Tianming's eyes widened the moment the bandage was secured. The wound beneath it began healing rapidly, faster than frying eggs in hot oil or bombing an aircraft carrier with a nuke. Tianming finally understood. This healing power had nothing to do with his body, it was the supreme bandage from his previous life. As everyone knows, there's a miraculous item in the world of One Piece called the Supreme Bandage. No matter how badly injured someone is, as long as they're still alive, wrapping them in the Supreme Bandage guarantees survival. Once bandaged, the body naturally heals and before long, they're back on their feet like nothing happened. In his previous life, Tianming had also received treatment using the Supreme Bandage. Back then, the phrase bandage yourself as soon as you get hurt had practically been branded into his soul. Nen abilities are shaped by the user's subconscious beliefs. So the supreme bandage from his previous life had crossed over into the Hunter x Hunter world through his Nen. Thinking about this, Tianming furrowed his brow. If his subconscious had created the supreme bandage, then surely it had brought over more than just that. He tore off the bandages wrapped around his body, revealing muscles that were firm and powerful like forged steel. First, he clenched his fists to feel the strength coursing through him. Then he enveloped his entire body in armament haki and activated the firm state of his Nen. Boom! The sudden surge of power made the mountain tremble. Giant cracks spread through the cave walls, eventually collapsing the entire cave entrance. A large section of the southwest corner of the nameless mountain collapsed. Just a few minutes later, a thunderous bang erupted from the rubble, sending sand and stone shooting into the air. From beneath the ruins, Tianming emerged. He stood tall in the middle of the wreckage, his right index finger pointing to the sky. A moment later, he slowly lowered his hand, a dazed and disbelieving look on his face. Now he finally understood his ability, and it was completely absurd. His Nen ability was called Memories of Past Lives. Simply put, it allowed him to bring concepts, beliefs, and instincts from his past lives into the current world. Take the Supreme Bandage, for instance. In truth, the fast recovery he experienced in his past life came from the incredible physical resilience of humans in the One Piece world. It had nothing to do with the bandages themselves. But because his subconscious believed that bandages speed up healing, his Nen had made that belief into reality. Now, as long as he wrapped an injury in a bandage, it would heal faster, as if that were a natural law of this world. At the same time, his strength after recovering from his injuries had clearly improved. It wasn't just that he had awakened armament haki's advanced application, Ryosoken, it was also due to another subconscious belief from his previous life: you get stronger by fighting. Of course, many worlds share this concept. But in most of them, it only applies to techniques or experience. In One Piece, fighting actually improves your physical abilities, like a passive skill of the Scions. Thinking of all this, Tianming's mouth twitched. It felt less like he had traveled to another world, and more like his warship had accidentally crashed into a massive island. All his crew perished, and now he was the only one left, forced to explore this strange place on his own. "Have I traveled through time?" he muttered. Yes. Chapter 50. Being omniscient and omnipotent was, of course, unrealistic. The ability known as Memories of Past Lives could only replicate concepts whose principles were already understood in the subconscious, like his increased combat strength and the Supreme Bandage. Tianming had never witnessed true omniscience or omnipotence with his own eyes, let alone understood how such a subconscious belief could be formed, so he could only fantasize about it in theory. Having roughly figured out the extent of his ability, Tianming decided to return to the Sky Arena that very day. He was worried that being absent too long would arouse suspicion. After briefly cleaning up the scene, Tianming made his way back to the Sky Arena using the same route he had come from, moving at a steady, unhurried pace. He felt a little anxious as he re-entered the city of Balo. Although he had used Life Return to alter his appearance during the battle, Simon, who had seen his real face, had been killed by him. Still, the abilities of Nen users were varied and mysterious, so it wouldn't be surprising if someone had managed to uncover his true identity. Luckily, nothing seemed to have leaked. Using his observation haki, Tianming spotted a wanted poster of Green hanging outside a bar. On it was an overweight man, completely unlike his current form. Even so, he remained cautious as he approached the Sky Arena. After casually greeting the staff, he took the elevator up to the 200th floor. It wasn't until the elevator doors opened and he stepped out that Tianming fully relaxed. No signs of surveillance or traps. Everything looked exactly as it had before, as if the chaos from a week ago had never happened. He returned to the door of his room with ease. Just as he was about to open it, a familiar voice called out from behind. "You came back without even saying hello. Gon's been really worried about you," said Killua, hands stuffed in his pockets, wearing an impatient expression. Tianming smiled and motioned for him to come inside. There were too many people around, and he didn't want their conversation to draw attention. Once they were both in the room, Tianming locked the door behind them and said, "I had some urgent matters to take care of, so I left for a few days. I came back as soon as it was done." Killua brows furrowed into a tight crease, but eventually relaxed as he sighed. "The day you left, Hisoka came to find us. He told us you were injured, badly, and that it would take at least 2 to 3 months for you to recover. I didn't expect you to come back looking completely fine in just a week. That guy's really full of it." Tianming understood. It wasn't that Hisoka was lying, it was just that he couldn't have known Tianming had awakened the supreme bandage. Without it, he probably would have needed months to heal. Suddenly, a thought struck Tianming, and he turned to Killua. "Aren't you and Gon practically inseparable? Why didn't he come with you?" Killua shook his head helplessly. Apparently, 3 days ago, Gon had received a formal challenge in the Sky Arena. His opponent was Guido, a member of the 3-man team of the Soft-Handed. This match hadn't been mandatory, Gon still had more than a month left to prepare. Even if he had forfeited, there would have been no penalty. But Gon was as stubborn as ever. Despite Guido being someone who had forcibly awakened his nen and had tons of combat experience in the arena, Gon insisted on fighting. He got seriously injured. It would take about 2 months for him to fully recover. Tianming stood up abruptly. Killua looked puzzled. "What's wrong?" "Take me to see Gon," he said. Tianming wanted to test if the supreme bandage could be used on others. If it worked, he would start carrying extra bandages and play the role of healer in future battles. Killua had no reason to refuse, and a few minutes later, they arrived at the medical ward where Gon was recovering. Each floor above the 200th in the Sky Arena had a dedicated medical facility, with professional surgeons on call 24/7. As long as a fighter wasn't killed instantly, they could usually be treated in time. They found Gon sitting upright on the hospital bed. His right arm was in a sling, his body wrapped in bandages, and his expression deeply troubled. He had gone a little overboard in his fight with Guido. Before and during the battle, he'd had plenty of chances to surrender and avoid serious injury. But every time he considered giving up, he convinced himself he still had a chance. Guido was a long-range fighter who used spinning tops as his weapon. Gon thought that if he could just get in close, he might be able to land a decisive blow. Unfortunately, he never got the chance. He didn't even manage to touch his opponent. Instead, he got seriously hurt by Guido's gyroscopic attacks. Thankfully, he had undergone some nen training beforehand. Otherwise, the fight might have ended far worse, possibly with broken limbs, like some of Guido's past victims who now relied on wheelchairs or crutches. Just as he sat there brooding, the door swung open and in walked Tianming and Killua. Gon's expression lit up the moment he saw them. "Tianming, you're back. Hisoka told me you were seriously injured. I thought it'd be forever before I saw you again." Tianming waved dismissively. "Just a minor scratch." As he spoke, he pulled a roll of bandages from his backpack, ones he had asked a nurse for on the way up. Gon and Killua exchanged a confused look as Tianming silently held up the bandages. "Your wrappings are a bit dirty," he said casually. "Let me change them for you." Gon was still bewildered, but Killua seemed to catch on. Over the past few days, Killua had learned how to use Gyo, the technique of concentrating aura into the eyes to see the nen aura of others. With Gyo active, Killua could clearly see the aura surrounding Tianming's bandages. He instantly realized this must be some kind of nen ability. He didn't know the exact effect, but he trusted that Tianming wouldn't harm Gon. Though confused, Gon didn't sense any hostility from Tianming, so he nodded and let him proceed. To their surprise, Tianming was very skilled at dressing wounds. In just over 10 minutes, he had completely rewrapped all the bandages on Gon's upper body. Just as he was about to start removing Gon's pants to reach his lower body, both Killua and Tianming stopped him simultaneously. Killua blushed furiously, steam practically rising from his head. Tianming just frowned and grumbled to himself about Gon having no sense of shame. The supreme bandage only needed to be applied to the upper body for full effect. Whether or not the lower body was wrapped didn't matter. Even in his previous life, if his legs were injured, he rarely used bandages, he'd just put them in a cast.